Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this public meeting of the Royal Cornwall Hospitals NHS Trust Board. Could I just check with board members? I know we've had some issues with the papers and the app which delivers the papers. Has everybody got their papers and managed to read them? Thank you. Sorry about that, but just wanted to check that the paperwork was all in order. So could I welcome you all very warmly, and also welcome members of the public and indeed members of staff who may be joining us on Teams live. Could I just remind you all that the meeting is live streamed and a recording of the meeting will be placed on the Trust's YouTube channel. And then could I also remind members of the public and people who are watching that Teams Live has the feature of live subtitles and that they can be accessed by clicking on the screen. And then just a few pieces of housekeeping before we get going, if I may. Can I just remind you all to switch off your device microphones if you're in the room, or mute them while you're not speaking, if you're watching online, joining online. And could I really emphasize today, because we've got such a heavy agenda, that I would like colleagues who are introducing papers to assume that we have read them and really keep your introductions as short as possible. I'm looking around, but not at anyone in particular, but you all know who you are. If we could keep that short, it will really help us, I think. And then after the introduction, I might ask board members who are particularly leading on particular aspects to speak, but then we can go into general discussion and questions. Can we please avoid the use of acronyms wherever possible? I'm beginning to learn to speak NHS, but even I'm struggling with some of the acronyms, so I'm sure for members of the public it would be very helpful to avoid them. We don't have any fire alarm drills planned, so if the fire alarm does sound, we are physically here in Truro. Colleagues in the room should vacate the building and gather in the car park. And then could I just say to members of the public, there will be an opportunity for you to raise questions, and the protocol is set out at the end of the agenda. But you can raise any questions you have using the Q&A function on Microsoft Teams. These will be reviewed by the company secretary as per the protocol I mentioned. The questions will be asked at item 21, and we'll allocate a maximum of 15 minutes to answer your questions. The company secretary will ask the question on your behalf, and then the relevant executive director will respond, or if that's not possible, we'll arrange for a written response to be sent to the questioners and to be included in the minutes. So we're hoping, but I'm reliant on you, we're hoping that we can get through by 1 o'clock. And we'll take a 15-minute break at around 5 to 11. I might need to move things around a little bit because we've got quite a few visitors coming in, and I don't want to inconvenience them. In terms of apologies for absence, as of yesterday, we didn't have any. And I think we've got a full house, haven't we? Good. So great to see you all here. In terms of those in attendance, Kelvin Hipperson will join remotely until midday. So if there's anything we need Kelvin for, we'll need to manage that. And as I say, we've got a number of guests coming in for various items, but we can introduce those when the time comes. Is there anything else by way of introduction?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. So item 2 is declaration of board member interests. Could I just remind the public that our register of interests is a public document and it is on our website, but we also invite members of the board to declare any interests on the day. So does anyone have any interests to declare other than those that are already declared?
Yeah. It's actually a reversal of declarations of interest. I finished with both Falmouth Harbour and Cornwall Foundation Trust in the recent week, so I have no declarations of interest.
Thank you, Adrian. And can we welcome you back from your Antipodean fact-finding tour?
Thank you.
Right, so if there are no other declarations of interest, can we move on then to item 3, the minutes of the previous board meeting on the 6th of March? And can I ask you to review those and approve them as a correct record? Thank you very much. On item 4 is matters arising and the action log. In view of the time, I'm not going to go through every action, but you'll see that they're all set out on the agenda paper. First of all, do any board members have any questions or comments on any of the items? And secondly, can I just ask the company secretary whether there's anything you want to say about the action log? Thank you. Kim?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You'll see that against last month's board story, I said I'd give a verbal update as regards the mammography vans. It's just to say they're fully supported. They assist across the county. The question was how we make sure we reach the more diverse or vulnerable, and it's the use of things such as supermarket, car parks, other locations that are across the county that give that diversity for all to be able to access. So it was just that update that was outstanding. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim. You'll be on parade again now because I think we're moving on to the board story at item 5. Just to remind you, we've reinstated the board story where it should be at the top of the agenda because it's what grounds us in what really matters. And it's also more convenient for guests who are joining us. We've got 15 minutes for this, including an 8-minute video. So I'm just going to hand over to our Deputy Chief Executive and Dual Head of Nursing, Kim O'Keefe, to manage the process.
Super, thank you. So welcome to Sally Dale, James Clark and Suzanne Atkinson, who form part of the senior leadership within surgery, general surgery and cancer. Can I thank them for their bravery and courage in bringing this story? They shared it at their learning event, at their governance event within their care group. But most importantly, you've heard us talk a lot about culture, behaviours and attitudes. And whilst this video is 8 minutes long, it's really important that we listen to Lynn's story, understand, and I think it will guide us as we have some of our further conversations today. And the members of the senior leadership are here today just to answer any more detailed questions as regards what they're doing, as regards the concerns raised. So Pete, over to you for the video, please.
It's 3 o'clock on the 9th of March AM. I woke and I knew straight away it was pancreatitis. I was so ill. I can honestly say I have never been this ill in my life. I was in hospital for 8 days and 7 nights. During that time, I was amazed at the different personalities, the hierarchy, the sarcasm, the actual conduct of people towards me. So all in all, it was a horrible experience, and I was made to feel like an alcoholic. Okay, I'm not an alcoholic. I haven't had a drink since the 8th of March, but I was made to feel like an alcoholic. I was open and honest to all the medical staff. I said, yes, I'm naughty. I drink a bottle of wine pretty much every night. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, but my body decided that you can't do this no more, Lynn. So I realised that. You know, again, I'm not stupid. And there was one consultant, but he stood at the end of my bed and he went, you have to give up the grosh. You got to give up the grosh. You got to give up the grosh. But it was so disrespectful. I was looked after. I had to fight for pain relief.
Yes,
I really did have to fight for pain relief.
Yeah.
I was scared. I had to ask for explanations of everything. Nobody actually volunteered it. It was as if I should know. So the next day I was allowed to go home. So I couldn't go to the toilet. And I strained and I strained and I strained. And unfortunately, whether or not, I think I aggravated the pancreatitis, it settled down and it just went, like that. I wasn't happy because for 7 days, 7 nights, 8 days anyway, I'd been filled with morphine and painkillers. Never once was I offered or given a laxative. Going through, waiting in the ambulance, then seeing somebody. And every time they came to my bed and they went, "So why are you in here, Lynn? Why don't you look at those notes over there? Because I've had it up to here. I'm back here now because of a, what do they say, an inappropriate discharge."
Discharge, yeah.
So eventually I found myself onto a ward and this consultant comes in. Then the next thing I know, he stood at the end of my bed and he goes, "Right, Lynn, what are you in here for?" And I thought, I'm sorry, but why do I have to keep telling? This is what I'm thinking. I haven't said anything. Okay. And I'd literally just been sick. And so I do you know, I think I said, that's it. I said, "I'm not telling her. I'm sorry. I ain't doing this. I ain't doing this." Like this. So he stood at the end of my bed and went, "Lynn, how much wine do you drink? Lynn, how much wine do you drink? Lynn, how much wine do you drink?" So I told him to. And he went, "Language." Every woman in that ward heard me. Felt like that. And I actually, from that, took that he was implying I had been released the day before and gone home and drank wine. I said to you, I've not drank wine.
No.
I've not had any alcohol
No.
since that. I felt, I don't know, I can't, it broke me.
Yeah.
And then it was a short while later, one of the nurses that I, built a rapport with because I'd been in so long before, I said, "Well, you do know what happened, don't you?" And she was, "Oh yeah." She says, "But I've known him for years. He would never have done anything like that." And she made me feel like I'd made it all up and I was lying.
Yeah.
Told I could go home if I wanted. So there really wasn't any choice, was there? I got the feeling that they wanted me gone. They really wanted me gone. So you got me a wheelchair, didn't you? Oh,
No, we
walked out. Yeah.
It was like you had a target on your back. Everybody
Everybody totally ignored me.
Absolutely dreadful it was.
Ignored me, and that is what I felt like when I walked out. They just wanted to go, goodbye, good riddance. And all through this ward, you've got these lovely things. Show respect to the staff.
Yeah, well,
They
used to do
showed
it the other
no
way as well.
respect to me.
It works both ways out.
Yeah.
And as I say, I was a servant police officer for 20 years.
Yeah.
I've dealt with all sorts, literally all sorts.
Yeah.
And all that time, I remained professional and I showed respect to that person I was dealing with.
Yes.
Be it a victim or an offender.
Yeah. Irrespective, isn't
Irrespective. That didn't happen to me.
No.
Being on the receiving end of it was very hard. And, I felt sorry for some people, and then others, I'll tell you, they, I don't know, the power's gone to their heads. They install fear, and, that's not right.
That's not what you need when you're in hospital, not
No.
very well. You need to
It's that
compassion.
empathy, isn't
You
it?
need compassion.
Exactly.
And
Following this complaint, a number of actions were raised to improve processes and the patient experience. It will be fed back to nursing staff via staff briefings and the team information board the importance of escalating a patient's pain to surgical staff, especially out of hours when the pain team are unable to review. It will also be fed back to the Emergency Surgical Unit, ESU, staff through the same channels about the importance of good communication with patients, especially when giving them unfamiliar equipment. DVT stocking usage will be individually discussed with the nursing staff involved in Lynn's care and communicated to all staff on ESU the importance of following prescriptions. The complaints and feedback about language and terminology usage as well as attitudes will be included in consultants' annual appraisals. The General Surgery Care Group will hold a shared learning event to discuss the concerns and to highlight to surgical and nursing staff the effect of poor communication and staff attitudes.
Before we open for questions, can I just thank Lynn and her husband for sharing their story and for the care group engaging with that story and taking actions, and hence they're here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim. Are there any comments or questions from board members? Either to Kim or Kim colleagues who are joining us?
Yes, I don't know, Sally or James, if you wanted to add anything.
I can speak up. Thanks very much. I think this is very reflective, thankfully, of a small proportion of complaints that we get to this extreme level, at least. But there is an underlying theme that still, I think, exists within the medical teams about the impact of communication on patient care and the impact it has more broadly to colleagues, and that includes junior colleagues and nursing staff. And it is a challenge that we have faced in general surgery, I think, in part because of the nature of the emergency presentations that we have. The patients who present to our unit tend to be in a position of more extreme acute pathology, but there is no excuse for a lack of a disrespectful communication with the patient. As that patient quite highlighted, there is no reason for us to lose our professional status towards them in terms of respect. But it is a problem that we have seen, and sadly, if we are challenged to try and deal with this, and I think it's not just general surgery. I think it is across the hospital that this sort of thing still exists. This sort of communicational challenge and behavioural challenge, and it spreads. It's a bit like a virus. If we don't nip it in the bud and get it sorted, it does spread, and other colleagues feel it's the right thing to do because they see seniors saying these terms, and it moves then across to other juniors, and juniors think that's the right thing to do. And it's really important that we make a stand and say no. So that's what we're trying to do in general surgery.
Thank you, James. That's all very clear. Very grateful to you for that. We've got a number of people who would like to speak. First of all, Richard Kramer.
Thank you, Chair. First and foremost, I think it's really important that when we have these beneficiary stories, we're not just highlighting good practice, but we're also highlighting when things go wrong so that we can learn from them. My takeaway was that the story shows that we weren't living our values, particularly around respect and compassion. It's a salutary reminder that our values don't just apply to staff, but how our staff relate to our patients. So I suppose the question is, how are we using this more widely to demonstrate when our values are not complied with, and how we can make change in the future?
Thank you, Richard. I should have said Kramer, not Kramer. Apologies. Could we gather up all the points and questions and then come back to you, Kim, please? So next is our Chief Executive, Steve Williamson, Then we've got Robin Jones, Chief Operating Officer, and then Uzma Bozai, Non-Executive Director. Steve.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Sally, James and Suzanne as well for joining the board. I agree with the observations just made about the importance of these really challenging stories to be shared with our board and public, so we can consider what further actions we can take. And it just builds on Richard's comments. So one of the challenges for me is what more we need to do to empower and encourage other colleagues to speak up and to challenge behaviour where it's inappropriate. So not necessarily for discussion now. I know we've got a staff survey item later on the agenda, but that theme, in addition to how we train and support and set expectations for all of our staff across the organisation, what further steps and actions we can take to empower everybody to feel empowered and required to challenge behaviour where they witness it.
Thank you, Steve. I'm sure we would all endorse that leadership statement from you. I also missed Ian Dean as well, our Chief Financial Officer. So I'll go to Robin Jones, then Ian Dean, and then to Uzma, because that's the order they've put their hands up. Is that okay? Robin.
Thank you. So that's a really tough watch, that video, and right that we've watched it. Very brave to share that with us. And Sally, Suzanne, James, really good to see the response from the care group. James, as you were talking, I was thinking you're right that we need to share this more widely. And I was going to offer that I'll link with Kim after this meeting, because we have our operational leadership group next week and Wednesday. And I think that where all of our care groups are present, all of our care group leadership teams, and we could share this story there, and so that there's a real opportunity for that cross-learning, as you described, James, so that we can make sure that it's considered across all of our care groups.
Thank you, Robin. Ian.
Yeah, so just a massive thank you to Lynn for being brave enough to share her story. I think it's incredibly brave of her. I just wanted to get a bit of assurance. I think, Kim, it talked about the fact that the consultant appraisals would be used as a way of feeding back, but just that there's been more immediate feedback as a result of the complaints and the learning, please.
Thank you, Ian. Now we go, I think, to Uzma, and then we'll go to Mary Kane, Chief Medical Officer. Uzma.
Yes, again, just reiterating my thanks to Lynn. It takes a lot of courage to speak up, especially when it's felt across the board, as she felt. I guess my question is around the communication aspect and what training, so it might be a question for Mary, what training are consultants, but all medical staff get in terms of communicating with patients? Is it a core training module? Is it something that they get before they come to us? So I think I'd value some feedback on that.
Thank you, Uzma. Mary?
So answering that question, there are a subset of consultants, predominantly those that are working in palliative care and cancer services, that have a mandatory programme that entails communication skills. The vast majority of doctors will not have had bespoke communication skills training unless they have either sought it out or they've had it very early on in their medical school careers. And medical schools are getting better at it. So the new cohorts of doctors that are coming through will often have had it. Some of the more senior members of our medical staff, so our consultants of long standing, won't have done. It has never formed part of their training, and it doesn't form part of a mandatory training. So there are elements within mandatory training that may pick it up, but not anything substantial. So I recognise that as an issue, and it's a matter of how do we deal with it without increasing the already substantial training load that we have on our teams, which is already causing us some challenge in terms of getting people through it. But it's a good point to make, and I can't assure you that everybody has. What I was going to say in addition to that, two things, I guess. The first thing is, while I was listening to was a very brave move on the patient's part to share that story. I was thinking that as well as the behaviour, which I'll pick up, it was another example, I think, of potentially a lack of an appropriate place to have those difficult conversations, and the soundproof curtain that we often come across. And we need to think about whether we're actually equipping the teams to be able to best manage their patients when they're having those difficult conversations. So that's something we might need to think about. The other thing I think is that, and it's picking up on I think the point that Ian raised about, did we give feedback to the consultant, which I think the answer is yes, and will that be further looked on within the appraisal? Equally, the answer is yes, is that I think we need to acknowledge that when a doctor or any member of staff behaves in such a way, we learn about it. Our chief exec's right. It's important that staff feel able to challenge, and it's important that that individual behaviour is addressed at the time or as quickly thereafter. And we will continue to do that, and I'm confident that we are doing that in the main. But I think it's really important that we recognise this is perhaps a symptom of a bigger cultural problem that we have, and some of that will be because over time these behaviours have been tolerated. And when you tolerate a behaviour over a period of time, there is an element that you are complicit or supportive of those behaviours. So when we think as a trust and as a board how we manage the cultural elements that play out through these individual interactions, I think we need to be very mindful that if it is a long-standing cultural issue that has become embedded, we work with our teams in a really proactive and positive, understanding and acknowledging way, not in a punitive way, because that's not the way we're going to manage this cultural problem. So I think we need to think really carefully about how, as a board and as a trust, we are supporting James's team and other teams, because it's not just James's team, to raise people up, not push people down.
Thank you, Mary. Very important. So I think we are going to have to move on, but I would like to go back to Kim to pick up any of the questions and to say anything you might want to say, or your colleagues, before we draw it to a close.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the immediate learning we've picked up, share more widely. Lynn has obviously shared this story. We are sharing it as a case study through complaints training and other forums. I'll pick up with Robin as that wider, and also with Mary at the consultant meeting. So we deliberately use these, as we do in safeguarding, for those learning when they come through. So that's really important. I think it's, as I absolutely endorse what Mary is saying, but also for James, Sally and Suzanne, actually dealing with it, taking it to their care group, having the conversation. It's important that they recognise it. It is a difficult message. What are we going to do next? And part of our compassionate leadership training, trust-wide, is all about empowering, having challenging conversations, but also being able to challenge behaviours, and that's really important. And I think this really sets the scene for our conversations later when we're talking about what are we going to meaningfully do as a board, how are we going to support, and how are we going to deal compassionately but firmly with behaviours going forward that makes a real difference for our staff at the front line as well as our patients. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim. And could I thank Sally, James and Suzanne for bringing this to us as well, and obviously particularly record our thanks to Lynn. I think that's probably an interview or a video we won't forget in a hurry, and we've learned a lot from it. I think it's good actually that, Kim, you and your colleagues had the courage to bring this to the board in a public meeting very openly, so that we can learn from it. And I think it is about learning and not being punitive, and the board encouraging us all to live our values. So I think Steve has made a very important point on behalf of us all, and I hope that message will go out to all of our staff from this experience. So thank you to Lynn and to everybody. If you're happy, Kim, having learned from that and taking forward the actions that you've described, we can move on.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So that takes us on then to my report. There is a written report which can lay on the table. Just one thing I'd like to pick up from it is that I mentioned that we would like to move to appoint a next director. We have a shining example of a former next director in Usma, who's now a full voting member of the board. For members of the public, this is a national NHS scheme which tries to encourage people from more diverse backgrounds to come onto NHS boards and play their full part in the governance. Because the more diverse a board is, the better its decision making will be, and the more other people from diverse communities can see that we are emphasising the need for diversity and inclusion. At the moment, as we'll see later in the agenda, we just can't undertake discretionary expenditure. That would send quite the wrong signal from the board. Equally, I've had representations that it might not be straightforward to recruit without remuneration, and that there may be some non-exchequer sources of funding that we could explore in relation to remuneration. So with the board's permission, I'd like to be able to press on if we can to see if we can recruit and also explore possible sources of funding other than the taxpayer to try and ensure that we don't put people off through lack of remuneration. Would that be a reasonable course to steer through this? Usma, would you be comfortable with that? So if we could amend my report to that extent. The other thing I just wanted to do, having agreed this with the Chief Executive, is just to take a few minutes, but hopefully it will help us to catch time back later, just to draw together a few threads from my recent meetings and from the agenda, and particularly for members of the board and members of the public, to just try and make sense of this huge volume of paper and agenda items which is facing us today. So this is by way of an overview. I'll give a copy of it to the Company Secretary for inclusion in the minutes. But when we look at the mountain we have to climb, you may be thinking May Day is an appropriate time for this meeting to be held. And I do think it's vital that we are very open and transparent with the public and our staff about the formidable challenges which we are facing, while at the same time renewing our determination to succeed. It's become very apparent to me from the meetings I mentioned in my report that some members of the public think the NHS is being abolished. So I just want to be absolutely clear that it is NHS England, an arm's length body, that is being abolished in the next year or so. Oversight of the NHS will then revert to the Department of Health and Social Care. The Royal Cornwall hospitals will remain as part of the NHS, providing care to around 80% of the population of Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, with University Hospitals Plymouth providing acute care in the north and east of Cornwall. The performance management of trusts like ours is moving from integrated care boards to NHS England, while it remains, and then presumably back to the Health Department. We are part of the South West region, headed by the Acting Regional Director, Sue Dehenny. The region is clear that this is a year of even greater focus on delivery. Put simply, we'll need to do more with less. There's now a special emphasis on the responsibility and accountability of boards to deliver. And I'm sure that we hope in time this accountability will be accompanied by more delegation, simplification, and flexibility through earned autonomy so that we can serve our local communities in a more bespoke way. Our agenda today reflects our focus on delivery. We have tended to deal with urgent and emergency care via the Chief Executive's report, but from now on we will have a standing item high on every board agenda to measure and oversee our progress. The Chief Executive will say more in his report. We have also placed the Care Quality Commission unannounced inspection of urgent and emergency care and medicine high on the agenda in order to talk about it openly and in public. In some ways, I feel the report is a microcosm of the NHS, with some colleagues feeling under huge pressure and that things are done to them rather than with them. This is also reflected in disappointing staff survey results, which we will consider later. We cannot achieve anything without the goodwill of our staff, so it's absolutely vital that the board lives our values and fosters an open, collegial culture where everybody's voice is heard. Sensitive, timely communication will be critical, with transmitters and receivers tuned to the same frequency. It's actually government policy that the NHS is broken, and the recent social attitude survey nationally shows record levels of public dissatisfaction. I can only speak for this trust. It doesn't feel broken to me. Indeed, much of our performance, for example, in cancer, maternity services, and elective or planned care, is among the top performers in England. We've broken even as an organisation for the last 6 years. We've been awarded £350 million for a new women and children's hospital, one of the largest single investments ever in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, and a declaration of faith in Cornwall's only acute hospitals. The analogy I would use is that of a strain gauge, testing the strength of materials. As the pressure comes on, more and more, eventually structural failure becomes inevitable, however resilient the material. And just as systems and organisations come under pressure, they tend to lay off their stress hierarchically until the full weight falls upon those least able to bear it. I would like us as a board to avoid that and take the strain on our shoulders as a board where the accountability lies. Our financial and operational plan has been approved for submission to NHS England by its deadline of 30 April by Finance and Performance Committee acting under delegated powers. However, we have put it on today's agenda in the public interest. There's now a huge focus in the NHS on productivity, partly because of fiscal pressures and partly because the significant investment in healthcare during the pandemic has not yet resulted in a matching improvement in productivity. By the end of March next year, we plan to have saved nearly £50 million, increased referral to treatment within 18 weeks for elective care from 69% to 74%, and reduced ambulance handovers on average to 30 minutes, all alongside a number of other targets. Both the Chief Executive and I wish to emphasise that the board will need to be laser focused on reducing ambulance waits. In many ways, ambulance handover delays are the very visible result of system pressures. But we need to sweep our side of the street and let others sweep theirs. The board will need to identify any and all possible actions to accelerate improvement for the benefit of patients and staff, including those of the ambulance service. All this and more will result in improved productivity of 8.6%. These targets have been set in planning guidance from NHS England and by our local integrated care board. They comprise together the most ambitious plan this trust has ever attempted. We now need to own this plan and do our very best to deliver it, not because we've been told to, but because it is right for our patients. Very sadly, not all of our staff will be able to come on this journey with us because of the financial pressures, and we will also be speaking openly about that today. We're all very concerned about the effect of job losses on individuals, their families, and local communities. As a board, we really do want to communicate sensitively and clearly with staff and trades unions and to mitigate workforce reductions as far as we can. We're also conscious that staff are being asked to do more with less and that we will have to have very, very tight controls on recruitment. The plain fact of the matter, colleagues, and this is where you do need to read my lips, the plain fact of the matter is that if we do not cut costs to the extent required, then we will run out of cash, and that will make a challenging situation infinitely worse. It is not surprising that we have only been able to provide partial assurance on the delivery of the plan, given its ambition. I don't know, to be honest with you, if we will be sitting here in March next year having achieved it all. But I do know this. We will fight for every minute of ambulance handover time, for every pound of savings, and every percentage point of elective care. In order to do that, we will need the help and support of the public and our partners. The clue of the emergency department is in its title. We have to keep it for life and limb-threatening accidents and emergencies, and we have to improve flow through the Trieste Hospital. We have made some progress, but there is much more to do. Finally, when I worked in Birmingham University many years ago, I had the privilege of knowing a remarkable man, the late Professor Tim Brighouse, some of you may have heard of, the legendary Chief Education Officer of the city. Tim always used to say that however bad things get, we can always do better than our previous best. So let us now, as a unitary board of executives and non-executives, commit to being better than our previous best. Our patients deserve nothing less. Here endeth the lesson. I'll hand this over to Lindsay for the minutes. Are there any questions or comments that anyone would like to pick up arising from that statement, please? Isabel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that was a very, very clear message. And I think we did all read your lips. So I think that was really helpful. I think the other thing that probably I would want to add at this point is that, you know, the next year is going to prove immensely challenging around our quality and safety agenda as well, because of the enormity of what we're trying to achieve. And so we'll come to my report later, but just to flag up the fact that, you know, that's going to be quite a priority as well in the coming year. So thank you.
You're quite right. We must always balance quality and safety with finance. Robin.
Speaking, David, many of us were all nodding our heads in agreement with your summary. And I thought as you were doing that, is it worth, Pete, after the board, snipping that, the image of the video of that, so we can share what you've just said widely for colleagues who don't always dial into the board, but we've got other mediums that our colleagues can. Good man. Thank you very much. But thank you, David.
Thank you, Robin. Happy to do that. Any other points? Matt Hill.
So hi, Matt Hill, Non-Exec Director. There's been an awful lot of, I'm going to say, pressure on staff as we try and achieve these many necessities. And it's just bearing in mind the patient story and bringing that into this, that we need to do this with compassion as well. For compassion to the staff, they then give compassionate care as well. So we need compassion for staff and those that we care for in their vulnerable times. It's just, yeah, to keep our eye on that as well as we move forwards.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Well said. So if there aren't any other comments, in view of the time, I think we should move on. But I hope we can take it that the board's in agreement with that statement, and it provides a framework for us to consider the rest of the agenda. And I apologise again for taking up your time with it. Could we move on then now, please, to item 7, which is the Chief Executive's report, and I'll hand over to Steve Williamson.
Yeah, thank you, David. And I was just going to start by commenting on what you just said. I think that absolutely sets the scale of the challenge and the scale of the ambition that we have as a board and an organisation. So I think it was absolutely clear in terms of what we must do in the interests of our patients and our staff and the extraordinary challenging context in which we're operating. My report touches on some of those aspects. I just wanted to draw out briefly some of the key aspects for board to be aware of. The first one, as set out in the report, we've now had confirmation from government about the funding envelope for the Women and Children's Hospital. David mentioned this, £350 million is the confirmed funding envelope, with construction on the main build expected to start in late 2027. We currently expect that to complete towards the end of 2031. The team are working through in detail whether the £350 million allocation is sufficient to manage the impact of construction industry inflation, and they're hard at work in doing that, but at the same time progressing rapidly with the enabling works, and we'll be working very, very closely with the new hospital programme and NHS England in progressing that. David also touched on some of the changes in the NHS operating model. You mentioned quite rightly the announcement about the abolition of NHS England and the merger with the Department of Health and Social Care. Our Integrated Care Board colleagues are working very, very hard on progressing the Integrated Care Board implementation and impact of that. And as colleagues will remember, Integrated Care Boards have been asked to reduce their costs by 50%. We are expecting in around a month's time to start to see some of the proposals from Integrated Care Boards nationally as to what is necessary to implement that. And it's our understanding that those changes are planned to be completed by the end of 2025. So that's the timeline that national colleagues are working to. In terms of 24-25, from a financial perspective, Ian will say more later on in the financial reports, but just wanted to acknowledge the really very, very significant efforts of colleagues across the Trust to enable us to currently be anticipating a break-even position for the year that we've just finished, subject, of course, to the normal audit processes. Patient flow, there is a significant amount of information in my report. I'm not going to go through that all. I'll take that as read, but it does try to set out some of the key additional steps that we're taking as an organisation to deliver or support the delivery of the urgent and emergency care improvements that David talked to. We just need to be absolutely clear that this is our single most important performance improvement metric in our organisation, given our current position. We must do everything we possibly can to improve ambulance handover performance, emergency department performance, and the length of stay that patients have in the emergency department. And whilst those three metrics are framed around the emergency department or its interface with our ambulance service, as David's already mentioned, they're symptomatic of performance across the whole Trust and across the whole system. So I wouldn't want anybody to take a view that these things are only enabled by our emergency department colleagues. They're enabled by the entire organisation and how we work across our wider system. There are a number of reports on the public board agenda today that are directly relevant to this. The information I've set out in the Chief Executive's report, the CQC initial response from their urgent and emergency care and medicine inspection. Of course, we review every single month anyway the integrated performance report, which includes the urgent and emergency care information. And just to flag item 8, the next item suggests a further level of board oversight and scrutiny for urgent and emergency care, all designed to ensure that we have complete awareness and we are assured that we're taking every possible action to manage every minute of ambulance handover improvement, not because it's a performance requirement, but we know absolutely that has a direct link to patient harm and to outcomes and to safety. Just briefly, eCare is updated in the report, and you'll see there the current anticipated revised go live for eCare of June 2026. That's had some significant scrutiny from our finance and performance colleagues, and we'll be expecting to provide further information to the Finance and Performance Committee and to the board with regard to that. That is a significant scale of transformation for our organisation, and one that's been long waited for and long desired. David, it would be helpful, I think, to strengthen the executive oversight by asking one of our non-executive director colleagues to undertake a check and challenge lead role for that eCare programme, which I think would further complement and strengthen the mechanisms that we already have in place. I think Adam has indicated a desire or being prepared to do that. So if that was acceptable to board colleagues, I think that would be a very positive addition and would further strengthen our organisational arrangements. So whilst I appreciate that wasn't referred to in my report, I might ask if board could consider that, and if we do agree that, to note that as one of the decisions that the board would take. And just in addition then, very briefly, as you see, the report sets out a governance improvement programme and provides an update on actions proposed closed, and provides an update on proposed extended timeline for 2 actions. And you'll also see that we've got our annual review of the Code of Governance, which is provided to the board. So very happy to take any questions on any of those matters or provide any more information if it's helpful.
Thank you very much, Steve. Can I suggest that we deal with urgent and emergency care altogether under the next item? but has anyone got any comments or questions from Steve on the rest of his report? Adrian.
Just comments, Chair, not questions. Colleagues will be aware that I was asked to take up the role of challenge for the Women and Children's Hospital, and I've now started that process. I toured the site yesterday for where the proposal is for the hospital to go. Next week I've got a further tour looking at enabling works. I've got monthly one-to-ones booked in with the project team, and I'm now on the programme board. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Anything else for Chief Executive? Aled Jones.
Thanks, David. And I apologise for bringing something up that wasn't on the report, but I think it's kind of significant enough to do so. And whether Steve or other board colleagues could give an update, if possible, on any changes that are imminent around the Supreme Court ruling on the terms women and sex in the Equality Act. I mean, that's been of national importance for patients and for staff working in the NHS. So whether there's a few words around that, even if it is you're still waiting for guidance, for example. Thank you.
Thank you, Aled. Steve or Kim, any?
Yeah, I'm very happy to comment initially, and I think Alison and Kim might both want to comment as well. We had been waiting for guidance from NHS England to ensure that we were aligned with actions and next steps that would be taken across the whole of NHS England. We have had some guidance, but that is really a very short summary indicating that that's work in progress. So once we've had further guidance or direction in terms of the expectations of NHS trusts and foundation trusts, we would be intending to move in alignment with that guidance. But Alison or Kim might be able to add more.
So we're really clear, Aled, anyone, that our policies remain in place until we receive guidance nationally that those will be changing. So we have had some queries from staff, but we're really clear that every policy or any guidance such as same-sex accommodation and those sort of things remain the same.
Thank you, Aled. No doubt it will be clarified in due course.
We'll bring that to, as that is, as further information is provided by NHS England, we will, of course, share that with the whole organisation and with the board as appropriate.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Aled. Could I come now to Ian Dean and then to Uzma Bozai? Ian?
Thank you, Chair. Just to extend my support to the non-exec role for eCare, I think that's a really sensible step. The delay of eCare has financial implications, but more importantly than that, it also has implications on all of those key targets that we've talked about. And I know it's now in June of next year, in 2026, but it would be really important for us as a board to keep a really close eye on that and how we manage that in advance of that date to make sure that's as successful as possible. So really endorse that proposal, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Uzma?
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the piece in the Equality and Diversity update. I was really heartened to hear the staff supporting their Muslim colleagues during Ramadan with a day of fasting. So, would love to see the vlogs that were recorded. I don't know if that's something that could be shared with the board or whether it's publicly available, but I thought it was a great example of our staff supporting each other.
Thank you, Uzma. Can we pick that up offline?
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. We'd be very happy to share that with board colleagues.
Thank you. And in the chat as well, colleagues are supporting Adam's appointment. So if there are no other comments or questions for the Chief Executive, could we just record the decisions arising from his report? I think we are agreeing that Adam should become the non-executive check and challenge director on the eCare project. and he'll report to us in the same way as Adrian on the Women and Children's Hospital, which I think is a good piece of process for our two major projects. It'll help the board, but I think it will also help the executives in delivering these major projects. Then we need to receive and note Steve's report. In particular, the update on the governance improvement programme, the actions proposed within Appendix 2. We need to agree to extend 2 actions which are listed on the agenda regarding the embedding of good practice and seeing sustained change, and around embedding the strengthening of equality, diversity and inclusion and health inequalities into board reports. We need to receive the annual review of the Code of Governance for NHS provider trusts and note our self-assessed compliant position. I think that's everything. Lindsay? Thank you very much. So could we move on then to item 8, urgent and emergency care? I'm going to invite Steve, first of all, to build on anything which he's already said, and then we can have a discussion. Steve?
Yeah, thank you. So just very, very briefly then, clearly as a board, we already have very significant oversight of our urgent and emergency care performance through the integrated care, integrated performance reports, through the chief executive reports and through individual reports that we bring forward to board. But given the imperative to more rapidly drive forward urgent and emergency care performance, this report has come forward, particularly focused on 3 performance measures. The first one being ambulance handover performance, the second one being the ED type 1 4-hour performance standard, and by that we mean the proportion of patients in our emergency department receiving their treatment and admission or treatment and discharge within 4 hours, rather than the whole system type 1, the whole system performance report for 4 hours. And then the third measure being the number of patients waiting more than 12 hours in the emergency department. We would be recommending, David, that there is as you've indicated already, a scheduled monthly agenda to the board, providing a progress report on each of those areas and identifying issues, actions, obstacles and matters for board escalation. But we're also proposing, given the nature of this performance metric, that board members receive a weekly dashboard providing an update on those 3 areas: ambulance handover, emergency department, 4-hour type 1 performance and 12 hours in ED. Clearly our executive directors have sight of that on a daily basis, but from a non-executive director perspective, we would like to commence from now weekly dashboard reporting of that, so non-executive directors also have sight on that. We wouldn't normally provide performance information partway through the month, but you will see in this report, given the importance of this particular indicator, we provided progress against our ambulance handover trajectory up to the point of the 24th of April. That was the date at which board papers were issued. I can now give an unvalidated update for the whole month's performance, actually on all 3 metrics. So the trajectory for ambulance handover performance for the month of April was 101 minutes or better. Our actual performance was 101 minutes and 31 seconds. For the month of April. That is unvalidated, but we're not expecting validation to have any significant or material impact on that. The trajectory for ED type 1 performance was 44.3%. The actual was 49.5%. So that's better than a trajectory for the month of April for the 4-hour performance. And for 12-hour performance, the percentage of patients waiting more than 12 hours in the emergency department, you'll see the trajectory was that should be no more than 14.9%, and the actual was 15.4%. So they are the unvalidated performance information, and of course it's only just the 1st of May, so that validation process will take a little bit of time to work through. But you can see in that we were better than plan for the 4-hour type 1 performance, 31 seconds behind the plan for ambulance handover, and half a percentage point worse than plan on the 12-hour performance. Even for those areas where we're on trajectory, that does mean significant waits for our patients, either in the emergency department or from an ambulance handover perspective. So it is critically important that we take all possible actions to deliver the level of improvement that we set out by February and March next year, and also to continue to review every possible action to enable that trajectory to be accelerated. So that's absolutely our determination to do that. So that's what the paper seeks to do, David, to provide clarity on those three indicators, to provide transparency on the trajectory, to identify some additional actions, and for those actions to include that weekly dashboard on those three areas to all board members. Happy to open it up and take questions or any additional comments.
Thank you very much, Steve. And can I thank you and the team for your responsiveness, because the day after I raised the need for more board oversight with Steve, he came back the next day with all these measures. So I think we can take assurance from that. So first of all, I think we've got Isabel Down.
Yeah, hello. Thank you. Sorry, I should have said Isabel Down, non-executive director when I spoke earlier. But I just wanted to ask Steve to confirm, I'm sure it is the case, but the tables that we're showing have been profiled to take into account winter pressures?
Yes, they have, but that's quite right as well to flag the level of challenge that we would be forecasting facing from a winter pressures perspective. So the tables have been designed to reflect our forecast demand at those periods of time, which includes winter demand, but also, as you'll see, factored in to include the impact of the urgent and emergency care improvement actions that we have underway. So there's a level of detail that sits below this that we haven't brought forward to the board for this paper, which I think would be included in our future monthly reports to the board, based in the actions we're taking around our clinical vision of flow and other aspects. But we shouldn't underestimate the scale of the challenge either. One of the things that NHS England have asked all systems across the country to do in the summer of this year is to finalise their system-wide winter plans so that they can be scrutinised by NHS England in the summer of this year. In previous years, that scrutiny has come significantly later to help build assurance nationally, regionally, and locally to be able to answer what I think is the question behind the question and comment that you just made. The level of improvement we're seeking to achieve, if you look at ambulance handover performance, for example, is an over 70% improvement in a reduction in the amount of time in ambulance handover delays. So that is a really significant level of improvement and builds on improvements already delivered over the last 12 months. I think that reflects the scale. But even with that level of improvement, the constitutional standard is those delays shouldn't be any longer than 15 minutes. So as a unitary board, it's going to be really, really important that we bring that combination of challenge, alignment and support to ensure the progression of these areas. It'll also be really important that we're focused on the things that we can transform within RCHT and are absolutely clear on those things, but also engage very, very closely with our system partners on some of the wider transformations which will also support this.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. And I'm really pleased to see that we're going to receive that dashboard as a board so we can remain laser focused on this.
Thank you, Isabel. And Robin Jones has also noted in the chat that the analysis takes account of summer pressures as well. Adam Broom.
Thank you, Steve. It's a really helpful report. It's just a question stroke suggestion, I guess, in terms of, given the importance of urgent and emergency care, the proposals that you've brought to us today, should we keep them under review and just make sure they're just right all the way through the year? So on a quarterly basis, we deliberately take a moment and consider, was the first point. And then whether, given what we're now bringing to board, do we need to ask each of the committees to consider what they're considering around urgent and emergency care and take a moment on that and for the board to specifically ask each committee to consider. And the third point was the next item, I think, is the CQC action plan. Should we get a regular update of the board on the progress against the CQC action plan, given it's around urgent and emergency care?
I think all three suggestions are really helpful and would further strengthen the steps that we're taking.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. So we'll include those points in our record of the meeting. Very good points. Thank you. Any other contributions? Robin.
Your CQC point, Adam, really well made. Kim, Mary and myself already had conversations about, and Steve, about bringing together our action plans so that actually it's one plan, so that the CQC thread is completely through our emergency urgent care recovery plans is that real golden thread. So actually you'll get the one plan against those two really important elements.
Thank you very much. Happy with that, Steve?
Yes, thank you.
I mean, you've made the point, but there's a huge amount of activity upstream of us, which is going on in the community, which also has to work as well.
Yes.
So we'll keep receiving these reports at every board meeting, public and private, and also the board will have the regular weekly updates as well. So we'll have a very clear line of sight to these metrics. Thank you very much. Can we move on then to item 9, which is the Care Quality Commission unannounced inspection? And could I ask Kim O'Keefe to introduce us, please? Kim.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take the paper as read and just draw out the key points. The CQC undertook an unannounced visit on the 8th and 9th of April. The focus of the visit was the emergency care services and medicine. This visit will change our rating. So this is an unannounced visit, but will be rated for those two areas. No immediate safety concerns were raised on the day. However, they had noted their concerns. On the 11th of April, we received communication. We had several meetings with our senior inspection leads, and that led to us receiving a letter of concern. There are 6 actions covered in that letter of concern, and we had already, from the verbal feedback, started to enact some of those concerns and make relevant changes. It's really important to note that we did not have to stop both our temporary escalation spaces, which is our boarding, holding, and what we know as surging, which is a chair space. The concerns were not as regards our policy, it was the practical application thereof, and you can see that outlined in the report. So handover, both verbal and our situational communication. Concerns as regards, as I've said, our surge protocol, which is how we use our chair spaces, temporary escalation spaces, to make room for the right patient to go to the right place during the morning. And that involved looking at our handovers in MAU, ED, as well as looking at changing our 15-minute move protocol to 25. All have been well received by our teams. We have got audits in place that we're able to monitor that. We've already sent to the CQC our first audit results, as well as all of the documents on time that have been requested thus far. The only thing I'd like to say is it was well recognised how open and honest and welcoming our staff were. They saw good examples of compassionate care. And whilst not highlighted due to data protection, there were 7 patient concerns that were raised, which we took immediate action on or gave immediate feedback to, which were included in there. So we, as Robin has said, everything that is in here is already included in the clinical vision for flow, our reform programmes, or the 7 pillars of work that are currently in UEC, which are all system-wide working. So we're going to have a group that comes together to actually say, these are the actions, as opposed to having another separate action plan, because anything that's not in those documents, I've already said, we would have a problem, and we haven't. And the CQC have recognised that whilst the inspection was here, this is a visit that looks at that system surge over this period. And I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you very much, Kim. Could I invite comments and questions on the CQC report? Richard Kramer first.
Thank you. I did a walkabout with Ella some time ago, soon after the changes were introduced, and I felt at that time there was real buy-in, particularly from the nurse workforce, to those changes. However, in the CQC report, there was a sense that their staff were not fully on board in terms of allowing sufficient time for review and reflection, the feeling that changes were operationally led, not clinically led, and people didn't feel that they own their own wards. So I just wanted to understand how we're doing around clinical engagement, and specifically, I know there's changes to the medical rota. I just wanted to understand, have they been implemented, and what's the feedback on that?
Yes. So, David, at the time of the inspection, I think the CQC and the staff recognised the sheer pace of the change, and sometimes communication runs a little bit behind. I think following the initial verbal inspection, taking that time out to listen, so the fact that the struggle was the 15-minute handover, we've added 10 minutes on, and that's taken the pace out. Instead of doing the morning, what we call surge, at 7 o'clock, that's now 7:45. That allows ED huddle, AMU huddle, staff on the wards to have that time to do their handover and then start, which they felt really listened to, empowered. We've had to do a little bit of myth busting about escalation, who makes what decision, but I think as we move forward with the reform programmes as well, I think what we've learned is sometimes you've got to take a pause, listen, and make sure people have felt heard, even if it's not the answer that they want. The acute medical model took effect on the 24th of February, embedded in our heads, and we heard it twice this morning as well. And that is absolutely being monitored by the senior clinicians. Still work to do, but that's part of that checking, challenging, listening, and again, encompassed in the clinical vision for flow.
Thank you. Very full reply. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Aled.
Thank you, David. I was wondering, Kim, as a kind of senior exec team, how much of the CQC report came as a surprise? And I suppose you could flip that in as much as like how much were you and we already cited on these issues? So yeah, what's the space for learning from this, and how much of it was like, well, we're kind of embedding this as business as usual anyway? But yeah, thank you.
So to be honest, there wasn't any surprises in this. I think as a system, we know that flow is one of our biggest challenges. So there wasn't any surprises in it. I think there was some, as we always do, Ala, there's some immediate check and challenge and listening. I think with the pace of what we were going through, as I've said, I think it was just we took this opportunity to say, right, you know, what do we need to tweak as opposed to stop doing to be able to get this done. I've got to be honest, the only small disappointments are always things like broken locks. those immediate things which you think are business as usual. So I think those were disappointment, but easily fixed, and I think most of them were in train anyway. We just had to make sure that they were done with a little bit more vigour.
Thank you, Kim. Now I'm going to go to Isabel, and then perhaps the final word from Steve.
Yeah, thank you, and I'll be quick. it just occurred to me. I think the CQC letter we welcome, and I think I'm really pleased to see it in the papers today in our public meeting, because there's a lot that we can take from it, and as Kim's already alluded to, we're already doing. I just wonder, when the CQC visit, do they ever come in the night? So would they say, right, we're going to turn up at 11 o'clock in the evening, and would we notice any difference? Would we anticipate any feedback being different, depending on whether they did a night visit or a day visit? They may have been there overnight this time, of course, but I'm not aware of it. Thank you.
Isabel, they didn't do a night visit this time, but on many previous occasions they have, and we're aware when they arrive they have right to roam over the period where they are. They always announce themselves, and at night they would let the site coordinator, or they come through reception. Reception lets the site coordinators know, and the testing there is whether the night plans that you have in place are it just does the same inspection as it does during the day, and tests whether the processes you have at night are what you say they are in the protocols. Would we expect any different? I think if they had come at night, there'd be no surprises in that either.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Isabel. Steve?
Thank you. Really important report. Just a couple of things that stood out for me. The first one is what CQC said about the interactions between our staff and our patients. So they talked about seeing kind and caring interactions between staff and patients, professional relationships at all levels, and just a really positive set of expertly informed, external, independent views about the way in which staff in the emergency department and in our medicine ward areas and elsewhere act. And when they visited, that was a period of very significant pressure in our trust. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and say thank you to our staff across our organisation for the amazing care that the CQC reflected from them individually. That was the first thing. Secondly, there are some things in the report that we must take action on clearly, and those actions are underway. But you'll see there that staff said to CQC they don't always feel empowered or listened to by the corporate team. And they described to the CQC that decisions appear not always to be clinically led. So both of those are really, really important that we address and ensure that as an organisation, as a board, as a senior leadership team, we're communicating, we're engaging, we're listening, we're hearing, and clearly we can't always act on issues that might be escalated to us, but we should be communicating that in those instances as well. So I just wanted to recognise both what CQC said about care and compassion from our staff, but particularly those aspects of organisational importance for us to address, and I know that is being taken forward with the team.
Thank you, Steve. I'll just take one more comment before we have to move on from Ella Tracy.
Thank you. Yeah, it builds on that, and also the discussion we're having around the UEC improvement in the previous agenda item. So I think as an exec team, we've reflected a lot on that feedback around staff potentially not feeling as listened to by the corporate teams in terms of how are we delivering these changes. There's been quite significant changes in the emergency department recently, and we are hearing that feedback. And my reflection back is we need to feed into the clinical vision of flow, which is our UEC internal improvement programme, ensuring we're really using the quality improvement methodologies that we're committed to as an organisation, because that directly speaks to the fact you have a shared aim, everybody in the team understands the problem you're trying to solve, what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to test that change, and you have regular reflections. So for me, it kind of reiterates the importance of that, and we will be ensuring through that programme that we really embed QI as the way we do things.
Thank you, Ella. So could we draw this to a close? In doing so, it's always invidious to name names because you leave people out, but I would just like to express my thanks to Kim and her colleague Bernie George, because I was fortunate enough to attend the feedback meetings from the CQC, which were very supportively delivered. But I just thought that Kim and Bernie were superb in the way that they dealt with the situation and followed up everything, worked incredibly hard through the whole week. And I just thought, you know, these are professional people at the top of their game. So I'd just like to thank them, if I may, and also thank the staff of the emergency department. I can only imagine what it's like to have 14 PQC inspectors arrive in an incredibly busy department. But again, I thought the staff acquitted themselves very well, and I'm very pleased that they felt able to speak so openly to the inspectors. So plenty of learning from this report, good process, and thank you all very much for everything that was achieved. There'll be more, obviously, in the future once we get the full report and the rating and all the rest of it, so we'll be coming back to this. But the Quality Assurance Committee has got oversight of it, and it will come back to us in due course. So let's just note the initial actions that have been taken. The improvement plan will be developed, and then we await the draft report and the full findings overseen by our CQC scrutiny group. And perhaps also worth noting Steve and Ella's comments about quality improvement and culture. Could we move on then to item 10, the Quality Assurance Committee report to the board? Just to remind you, Isabel, as the chair, will introduce the report. There's no need for executive directors to add anything other than they added at the committee. And Isabel will also cover issues which the committee wants to escalate to board level. And I think Mary Kane, our Chief Medical Officer, might also want to comment on the items that have been escalated. But I'll go to Isabel first.
Yeah, that's fine.
Isabel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And I'm going to keep this really brief because you'll see on the agenda that many of the items that we discuss at committee are here today as separate agenda items. So we've already just covered one that came up at our last CRAC meeting, our Quality Assurance Committee meeting, which was around our CQC inspection. I won't dwell on that because we've just had a good discussion. The committee meets monthly and feeds through to our board. Each month we have a very, very full agenda of items relating to the quality and safety aspects of the services that we provide to our communities in Cornwall. In March, you'll see from the report that there were various items discussed, and the major decision taken was to approve the proposed draft quality account for inclusion in this year's quality account, so for March 25. So we approved that. And then I think that there are two issues I wanted to just flag to board. I'm not going to go through the report, it's self-evident and people would have had a chance to read it, but two issues that we are escalating to the board given the lack of assurance that we've had within our committee. The first being our ongoing concern around the mortality and metrics associated with fractured neck of femur. And this has been something that's been on our radar for some considerable time. And we really feel that we need to do a major step up in order to address the concerns around the performance of those particular aspects of service. So we're escalating that for the board to be mindful of, aware of, and also perhaps to offer a view on that. And the second area, again, an area of major concern for us and affecting, you know, a lot of people within Cornwall and Isles of Scilly is the progress and improvements around stroke services and seeing deteriorating metrics again around our stroke service. So those were the two areas that we wanted to escalate to board. Other than that, I think it's fair to say that we are gaining fairly full assurance on the majority of items that we're seeing. However, just to finish, I would pick up and revisit again David's report at the start of today's meeting and just underline the fact that when we're planning our work plan for this current year, we're really going to have sight on the major challenges coming out through the dashboard that Steve has already mentioned, but make sure that we are covering the really essential items that we need to as a committee in terms of the quality and safety transformation and change that's going to be taking place. So I will stop at that point and accept any questions that people may have that don't relate to papers that are forthcoming.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Mary, can I just check? Would you like to deal with fractured neck of femur or broken hip?
I'm happy
now
to either deal
or
with
later?
fractured neck and femur and stroke mortality now, or I will pick it up when I do the learning from deaths report. I'm happy
Well, I
to
think
do
given
whatever
that it's
feels.
been escalated by QAC to the board, it might be helpful to
Yep.
deal with it now.
Happy to do that. So if I take fractured neck of femur first, so as Isabel said, we've had an awareness of a high HMSR, so hospital standardised mortality rate associated with people with a fractured neck of femur, so a fractured hip, for somewhere between 12 and 18 months. So it's something that we've noticed continuing to trend in the wrong direction over a substantial period of time. And there have historically been interventions, so the perfect week type interventions, where we know that we have it within our gift to turn this around and improve the situation, but we have not been able to maintain that over a sustainable period of time. There are shortcomings of the HMSR data as a metric, but there is a national hip fracture database that has some very key performance indicators that are contemporaneous and are well respected as very good measures that demonstrate performance. And RCHT, whilst performing well against, there are 8 key KPIs for fracture neck of femur. RCHT, whilst performing well against several of them, are not performing well against a number of them. And there's one in particular which is considered to be the best indicator of an increased risk of mortality and morbidity, and that's time to theatre within 36 hours. And whilst nationally, we know that trusts struggle with this metric, and the national average is 58% of patients getting their surgery within 36 hours from admission, we have been falling short of that for a sustained period of time. In November, we were achieving 36%. Now, we have made some gains, and we are currently, for the last 2 months, managing 50%. So the trajectory for the last 2 months has been both improved and sustained, but we are still falling short of, well, I mean, 58% as the national average is not what we should be aspiring to. We are falling short of getting the majority of our patients to theatre within 36 hours. The improvements we've seen since the new year are as a result of an action plan that we have in place that has been being led by Rick Strang, an improvement director that is currently supporting a number of aspects around flow, and one of our senior nursing staff within the ACCT directorate. So we have an action plan with a number of metrics and regular scrutiny, and to make sure that it remains on the radar, we have now made it part of the, I think Chief Executive alluded to our clinical vision of flow programme. It's now a part of workstream 2 of the clinical vision of flow workstream, so that we are having very regular scrutiny of the trajectory and the action plan that sits below that. So certainly in March and April, as I say, we've had an improvement in our time to theatre. We've also had a significant improvement in what we describe as a golden patient. That is every trauma list starting with a fractured neck of femur patient, so that we have identified the patients early and got them to theatre quickly. And in both March and April, we achieved that for 85% of our lists, which is a substantial improvement. I think it's really important, and this is for fractured neck of femur and stroke actually, but it's really important that we recognise that the biggest impediment to achieving the performance we would like around fractured neck and femur and stroke directly relates to the overarching problems we have around clinical flow. Getting a patient to the right place in a timely fashion so that they are seen by the right people, get the right treatment and on the right pathways, is crucially important to both of these cohorts of patients. So although there is a work plan in place to specifically look at the key performance indicators and drive fractured neck of femur performance forward, the work that is being done as the part of the clinical vision of flow will also make a significant improvement, hopefully, to both of these cohorts of patients. So they can't be seen in isolation from the bigger piece of work that is being done that pertains to our front door, which has obviously a knock-on effect to the category 2 response times and the category 3 response times, all the way through to our back door. The key piece of work we now need to do for fractured neck of femur, because you'll have heard about I've told you about the work stream and the task and finish group that are looking at this. You will have noted that the people leading that piece of work are not from the trauma and orthopaedic service. So the most important thing we must do now is to make that piece of work become sustainable and continuous by the team that is primarily responsible for these patients taking ownership of this piece of work. We appointed a new clinical director for the peripheral sites clinical care group, in which trauma and orthopaedics sits the week before last. That's Mr. Gavin Bartlett. He has already started to embrace this as a priority. He will be coming to the next Quality Assurance Committee to present, and I think that is really key. So that as I would say, in terms of what I think is the priority to make sure that this continues, is that's fractured neck of femur. If I go on to stroke,
just pause there.
Happy to.
Richard, is yours?
No, I'll wait. I'm just wait till.
Okay.
Carry on.
So
carry on then, if I go on to stroke, so stroke is something that has been long recognised as a challenge. There have been periods of time over the last couple of years where stroke mortality has periodically flagged as an outlier, and we are also aware that we have a declining SNAP score. So we're currently SNAP score D. And I would have to look to Kim. I can never remember I shouldn't be using acronyms, but I struggle with remembering what, it's the Sentinel Stroke something programme, but it's basically a national programme that looks at stroke performance. I struggle with that, the initials there. So we know that there is an issue with stroke, and we have a stroke improvement group in place, and that's got a system view. So, and that's important because the stroke pathway begins outside of RCHT and finishes outside of RCHT. And it's crucial that when we're considering stroke performance, we're looking at every aspect of the path. Stroke, as I've mentioned, performance hinges on many things, but one crucially is our ability to manage to get our stroke patients timely review by the right team and admission to the stroke unit. So that's why it fits in with the overall clinical vision of flow work. And stroke is also picked up formally within one of the clinical vision of flow work streams to make sure that we have that oversight and that it is recognised and pushed forward in the same way as the other target areas. We have also invited an external Royal College of Physicians review, again, to look at the system pathway, not just the focus on RCHT stroke performance. They're with us today and tomorrow. So before board today, Steve, myself, Kim, and a number of others met with the RCP team. They will be flagging to me at any point during the 2 days any immediate safety concerns, and we will also be meeting with them tomorrow for their initial feedback, and they are going to be able to support the work that we need to do to improve stroke performance. One thing that they did say this morning, because we have a very open and honest relationship with that team and have been able to supply them with a lot of information before their visit, is they are assured that within the system and within RCHT, we know what needs to be done. It's about them supporting us and system partners to ascertain the best way of achieving what needs to be done to improve that stroke performance.
Thank you very much, Mary. That was really helpful and clear. Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. I did want to come back and talk a little bit about stroke, because I picked up in the QUAC report, but also in the integrated performance report, our stroke metrics. And it was very worrying to see that 44% are admitted to stroke treatment within 4 hours against a target of 90%. And of course, if people aren't seen more quickly enough, they're going to be more disabled by their stroke and will need more therapy. And then I was very concerned that we were struggling around recruitment for staff around rehabilitation. So given increasing disability with delayed presentation, are we doing enough to recruit to positions? And also, are we able to give clot-busting drugs in ambulances? And are our 21 stroke beds sufficient? So a few more questions, I'm afraid, Mary.
Okay, I'll pick them up. So in terms of the, so in RCHT, there are different models of delivery of thrombolysis. So it isn't given in the back of ambulances. Thrombolysis in RCHT is delivered within our emergency department. It's not, and that is something that is under review as with the Royal College team. It's not a model that's unique to RCHT. A number of places do that. The important thing is whatever model you have, it works well. So our thrombolysis is given by emergency department physicians, and we are currently in the process of looking, and we have identified the individuals looking to appoint 2 additional stroke AMPs that will be able to support that function within the emergency department. Remind me of the next part of your question. Have we got enough beds? We're having a look at the stroke beds at the moment. So currently the stroke unit is Phoenix Ward. The overarching number of stroke beds is adequate when they are not filled with outliers. So the problem we have is that I guess there are 3 groups of patients that we have on Phoenix Ward. We've got the appropriate patients that are stroke patients that need to be and should be rapidly admitted to Phoenix Ward for the appropriate care in the right place. We have a group of patients that are appropriately admitted to Phoenix Ward who present as a stroke, but they are stroke mimics. So there are a number of other presentations that when they are first seen appear to be a stroke, and then rapidly it's ascertained that they are not stroke patients. And they may well need inpatient care, but potentially not on Phoenix Ward. And one of the challenges with the hospital flow is making sure that they are then rapidly moved to a more appropriate destination to free up the stroke beds. And then we have a problem, which is that when we are really stuck for bed capacity, particularly out of hours, other non-stroke presentations may be put in the only empty beds that we have, which may be the beds on Phoenix Ward, which then means that if a stroke patient comes, we don't have the free beds. That is a particular targeted piece of work. And I could even see this morning from the site team's conversations that we were looking at making sure that we had ring-fenced beds on Phoenix Ward to make sure that we have them for the stroke patients. So it's not the overarching number of beds that is the issue, it's how we use those beds and how we get the flow through those beds to make sure that the patients can go to the right bed when they need it.
Rehab workers?
I can't answer the question about rehab. I don't know if Kim can answer the question about staffing for stroke rehab. If not, I can go away and bring that back.
Yeah, I think part of the review, Richard,
is looking at it.
Is looking at that, and are we doing, because of the acute pressures of that Phoenix are under, how do we work more a ward which is absolutely there for rehab, and we don't always get that flow right. Hence, we might not have the right staff in the right place. So part of that review will help us understand that. It's also advancing the skills, both for advanced practice for our nurses and most importantly our allied health professionals, and how that can speed up assessment or take on some further responsibilities so we don't always need consultant input.
Thank you, Richard. I'm only going to take 2 more comments because we're starting to get adrift. First one is from Uzma, please.
Kim might have just answered my question, which is further on in the Learning from Deaths report, but around stroke, about the downstream availability of community-based rehabilitation. And it's, I think you've just said that you'll be working with CFT to look at that. I was wondering if it was an ICB whole system issue.
So the visit today is looking at the entire pathway end to end. So as you said, Uzma, it's a whole system. And we have, CFT have got home community services within people's own home, as well as the rehabilitation. Okay. But of course, it's looking further upstream as well to do some of the preventative work as well.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And could I, Matt Hill, could I just mention for members of the public that Matt is a consultant anaesthetist at University Hospitals Plymouth, as well as a non-executive director. Matt.
Thank you, and that may have relevance to what I'm going to ask, which is about, have we got early anaesthetic input into the patients with fractured neck of femurs, and just, I suppose, assurance that these patients aren't, due to flow problems, being delayed in getting to theatre because they're in ED, and we're not optimising them in where they are in ED to get them to theatre, potentially from ED, and just minimise the delays we have. So yeah, those 2 points, please.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. We've actually done a lot of work on making sure that we have a streamlined pathway to make sure that our fractured neck of femur patients aren't stranded in the emergency department. So we've instituted a pre-alert. We have a specific ED, so emergency department pathway, which is rapid assessment, analgesia and transfer. We've also in the process of changing the visibility via the electronic record of the patient pathway, so that all parts of the pathway are cited on these patients. We have particularly good engagement from the anaesthetic team, who are heavily supporting the Golden Patient Initiative and early assessment to make sure that there's no impediment from an anaesthetic perspective to get these patients to theatre. So that is part of the pathway that's working really well. I think one of the things that is driving the improvements that we are seeing is the ability to flow from ED, because you're right, it would be a real issue if these patients were stuck in the emergency department and not in the trauma unit. So we now have ring-fenced male and female beds on the trauma unit to allow that pathway to happen. And I think if I had to say there was one initiative or one thing that we have done as part of that workflow that is already making a difference, it's those ring-fenced beds and that streamlined pathway.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mary. Is that a legacy hand, Uzma, or did you want to come back?
Oh, sorry, it is a legacy. Sorry.
Okay. So I think we really will have to pause there. I'm sorry. Excuse me, because we are starting to get adrift. But I think we can take, as a board, Mary, assurance that there is a plan, both for stroke and fractured neck of femur, and that you'll be keeping us informed, and that Quality Assurance Committee is taking oversight and ownership of this, because I know it'll be a matter of concern clearly to the public in relation to strokes and fractured hips. And you've got a plan for a pathway of improvement, even though we're not there yet. So thank you for that. Could we note that? And Kim, could I suggest, because we've got colleagues joining us, that we go to 10.2 now, the Patient Safety Incident Response Plan, because I think that Bernie George and Naomi Burden are already with us for this item, just to save wasting their time.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to 10.2 and handing over to Kim.
Thank you. And I have Bernie George, who is the Director of Nursing and Midwifery and Allied Health Professionals, and Naomi Burden, who works closely with Bernie on patient safety. So Bernie, I'll hand over to you and Naomi.
Thanks, Kim. I know Bernie is online but off-site, so I'm not sure how strong your signal is always, Bernie. Hiya.
Hiya, so I'm here. So thank you, everyone. So this is our third patient safety incident response plan, which we have done a huge engagement piece with our operational colleagues, our clinical colleagues. It's been through subject matter experts at our incident review and oversight group. And it's also had engagement critically as well from our patient safety partner, and the Integrated Care Board with the quality team have approved it through those forums. For members of the public, this is a living public-facing document that defines how we as an organisation will implement the National Patient Safety Incident Response Framework. That's mandated by NHSE. And what it shows is our continued commitment to safety and improvement, as we also kind of navigate the challenge around operational performance, some of which you've heard today, and also the financial context in which we work. So our framework that we've iterated as we've improved over time is designed to be realistic and allow staff, patients and families to focus their efforts around safety to where we believe that we can make an impact. And in the development of this particular iteration of the framework, we've had feedback from Audit Southwest to keep maturing our safety work. So they've done a piece of work that's benchmarked 7 organisations from a maturity perspective, and it's been a good exercise to do in just keeping us focused about where we need to keep our leadership attention around safety and improvement. So for us, this means first and foremost that we've absolutely got to continue to have a compassionate response to those that are affected. That's our patients, their families and our staff. It absolutely is the application of system-based approaches to make improvements, which makes it easier to do the right thing every time. It must always be a considered and proportionate response in terms of a learning event to focus on delivering improvements in our organisation and in our system. And what the framework also does is support oversight at an organisational and ICB level. So this is about holding ourselves accountable for progressing this plan and the wider safety work in terms of the system. And I think for me, everyone visiting, receiving and providing responsible care for RCHT has a role to play in terms of ensuring safety and how we collectively improve. And I'll hand you over to Naomi for some more specifics within the plan.
Thanks, Bernie. So as Kim mentioned, I'm Naomi. I work really closely with Bernie. I am the patient safety specialist in the trust and also a lead for safety culture. So just taking you through the plan, which I know you have read, you'll see that we're trying to amplify the things that we have done well from the previous patient safety incident response plans. And we're noting that work within the improvement space here. We continue to mature our relationship and work closely with QI so that we're not duplicating and we're linking in with existing improvement work as well. I just want to give assurance to both the board and members of the public that every incident that we receive at RCHT is reviewed. And we also work closely with our system partners to do that too. And we'll have actions in place for every single one of those. These priorities just point out where we're going to focus and make that real concerted effort and drive. We want to continue to engage the voices of our community through patient safety partners, patients and staff. And you'll see that through the level of engagement that we have done. It also includes information such as complaints and engagement work where we hear that voice too. The plan also includes key enablers such as training capability, moving away further from root cause and endorsing restorative just learning culture, Leadership, that wider culture piece around organisational values, safety behaviours are as crucial as processes, and so we want to do the two. The national priorities, which you can see on the plan, are set by NHS England. But if I draw your attention to the local priorities, which on the board papers are page 181 or 26 of 27, if you're looking at the specific PSERP. Sorry, those are the other learning responses that we'll do outside of the priorities. They're already existing, they're not new. On page 25, sorry, or 180 of your papers, that's our local priorities. We've woven those into existing work streams, again, because we know we've got the right clinical operational engagement to deliver these. So we want to reduce the number of outstanding assessments around deterioration. That's across a number of things such as falls, pressure ulcers, dementia, delirium, as well as physiological observations. It means we can spot changes early, and that's been a thread through some of our work. In terms of discharges, we know that vulnerable adults and those receiving end-of-life care, we have areas of improvement, whether that is process or experience. And then looking at duty of candour, which the board and public will note is a theme through the papers today. There is a 10-day time frame set out in our policy. We are completing duty of candour conversations. They're conversations that we need to have when there's a moderate or higher level of harm in being open and transparent. Our culture is right, our compassion is right, but we need to see what we can do to make that more timely and to get within that 10-day time frame, which isn't a kind of regulated target. It's an indicator of timeliness. So we need to just move ourselves a bit more into that space. And then the last one is around recognising the impact of violence and aggression at work, clinically driven or also known as behaviours of concern. And we're looking at elder care and those with a neurological condition because we think we can be more proactive in some work there. It's already started, but we'd like to really get that going in earnest and linking to the violence and aggression reduction strategy. And I think I won't say anything further, but just take any questions from the board or public.
What I'm going to suggest to the board is this is such a clear report that has been through lots of process. Unless you think it's negligent of me, we've had very clear presentation from Naomi and Bernie. So I would ask you to approve this report because it speaks for itself. Is that okay? Good. Thank you. Thank you both very much for coming, and sorry if we kept you waiting. So now we're getting a bit seriously adrift. I would like to go back to item 10.1, maternity and neonatal safety report. This is a report we have to have every month following the Ockenden report. But there's only one matter you need to escalate, Kim. Would you mind just dealing with that so we can have up some time?
Absolutely. You can see it's already comprehensively covered in Isabel. I will just bring to the attention, actually, the neonatal nursing workforce challenges continue. It isn't just about recruitment, it's also having what we call qualified staff in specialty. Currently in neonates, that's sitting at 21%. Nationally, the expectation is 70%. We are working really, really hard with the care group to make sure we've got the right support in there to be able to free up a really stretched and challenged workforce to be able to undertake this qualification. And we're looking at how we better manage that. And the only other thing I'd note is the CNST Year 7 is now released, and we'll be working on that. And Action Plan 8, we've been given some additional funding for, which is our anaesthetic training, and that is the one that we had submitted as part of our Year 6 return, but it's come back and they wanted to note that they still weren't happy, but they've given us some additional funds that we discussed at length. So we will be receiving some money from CNST Year 6. We just don't know how much now, and we should know, we're hoping next week, so we'll keep everyone informed. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you very much, Kim. Any comments or questions from Kim? It's a national issue, of course, the qualification issue. If not, could we note that report and the extra information that Kim provided. Thank you. Let's try and finish off this item perhaps before we have our break. The Learning from Deaths report, Q3 report, is at item 10.3. Very comprehensive and clear report. Thank you, Mary. Could you, I know there are some things you need to raise, but if they could be done concisely.
Yes, well, I think we've probably gained some time by already covering fractured neck and femur and stroke, which I think would have been the two areas that I think we ought to have been focusing on. So yeah, for the Q3 Learning from Deaths report, I think the things to note are that our summary hospital mortality indicator is stable and remains within confidence limits, and our crude mortality is comparable with previous years seasonally expected. Our HMSR rolling 12-month position remains below 100. I will in a moment allude to an anomaly in our HMSR data that it's worth the board being aware of. Our alerts are number 3 in terms of our hospital standardised mortality rate. We've discussed fractured neck, femur and stroke already. Anemia was a new flag, but it was pertaining to a small number of patients, only 13 patients, which sometimes does produce unexpected results. So we are undertaking a case review of those 13 patients just to make sure that there's nothing that we ought to be aware of. Stroke and fractured neck and femur, we've already discussed and are reflected on the risk register. Our medical examiner service continues to operate very well. We have a new lead medical examiner as of this month. 97% of deaths are being scrutinised. Our medical examiner it also attends our mortality review oversight group. Of the deaths that are scrutinised, 7.5% or 7.4% are referred for a more in-depth review, and no themes have been noted. The medical examiner's office and the patient safety team and others also are able to feedback concerns raised by families, bereaved families, and we ensure that there is learning derived from that feedback also. In Q3, there were 22 structured judgment reviews, including reviews of 4 priority deaths, that is deaths in this case of people with a learning disability or autism. And there's a summary of the learning on page 9 and 10 of the report. There were 2 deaths amongst those that were subject to structured judgment reviews that were initially highlighted as slight evidence of avoidability. On deeper review, 1 was concluded to have been unavoidable. One of the cases, there was a question about whether the most appropriate modality of treatment was applied to that patient, and that's now having a more in-depth review with our cardiology team. There were 4 perinatal deaths in Q3, and you can see within the report that there is a review and an action plan where appropriate in each case. There is also a table that highlights the mortality and morbidity meeting activity across the services, and that activity is now being supported by Ray Sinclair, who's our newly appointed Clinical Director for Clinical Safety, Effectiveness and Quality, and they're also being supported by the Patient Safety team. The resultant quality improvements from those M&M meetings are shown in the report, and what we will do in subsequent reports is demonstrate the actions that have been taken on the back of those plans. In the quarter, there were 15 inquests in terms of coronial activity, 15 inquests attended by the RCHT teams. There was 1 resultant future prevention of death notice that pertained to a patient who presented and subsequently passed away from neutropenic sepsis. There's an action plan detailed within Appendix 6 of this report to demonstrate what is being done as a result of this, and there is also a system-wide sepsis plan in place which all partner organisations are part of, and that is driving through changes to ensure that we are performing well against the Sepsis 6 pathway. I mentioned that we had a problem with our HMSR data in November. The problem that arose in November was unanticipated, and it was due to the fact that whilst we have really good processes in place for coding of patients who have died, that is seen as a priority, and we are managing to keep up with that activity so that it's contemporaneous. We have a shortfall in our coding capacity at the moment, which has meant that another focus has been to code the planned elective activity for reasons of oversight on performance and for financial purposes, which has meant that there has been a shortfall, but the shortfall was largely in the non-elective activity that the hospital was seeing over that period of time, which significantly impacted the denominator that was used to calculate HMSR, which gave us a falsely elevated HMSR for November. So whilst that was partially mitigated by catch-up activity in coding between the flex date and the freeze date, which are the two dates where you have for submission of the HES data that underpins the HMSR calculation, we were still demonstrating it had dropped from 171 to 116 over that time period, but 116 was still a significant outlier at that close of play. So I hope the board can be assured that because we are looking at other metrics, including crude numbers of crude mortality and SHIMI, and we have recognised what the problem is and are seeking to address it, I am happy that that is not a reflection of our performance. It is a reflection of the data and the coding activity, and we do have a plan in place to sustainably manage the coding capacity so that we don't have this ongoing. But I felt it important to flag that to the board because a jump from 98 to 171 in month was significant and surprising.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Richard.
I'll be very, very brief. I spent the day with the Learning Disability and Autism team. First and foremost, they're a real credit to the Trust, not in terms of advocating for patients and carers, but also for advocating with alongside care groups. And they really want to pay tribute to the team and Bernie and Kim for their leadership. They wanted me to raise issues at the board, so I'm doing so now. I just wanted to ask, in terms of number of deaths, the number of deaths have doubled since 12 in 2023 and 23 in 2024. So it'd be good to get a sense of why the numbers have increased. Mary mentioned some of the cases of deaths. There was a feeling that the fourth case, the deafblind person with pneumonia, might have been avoidable. So it'd be good to get thoughts on that. And lastly, from Alison, just what % of staff have completed the McGowan training and what's the feedback been like on that? Thank you.
I can answer. I don't know. I can't answer the Oliver McGowan training percentage, and we can certainly come back and we recognise it's something that we need to make sure that everybody is undertaking. Those that have undertaken it will realise there's a time commitment involved that is quite significant compared to some other mandatory training. So it's something we need to facilitate, but we need to think about how we do that in the current climate. In terms of the numbers of patients with learning difficulty and autism, you're right in that it has increased. We are still talking about small numbers, and I think because of that, the importance is that we are making sure that they are priority reviews and that each case is looked at in detail. Of the 4, and you can see a small breakdown within this report, that were identified within Q3, I think it is relevant that one of the cases, there were issues around documentation, but also around timely, or not being able to be completely assured of timely administration of fluids and of analgesia. And because of those findings, that is being looked at to make sure that there is appropriate feedback and learning. I also am interested, and I didn't allude to it on this occasion, I have alluded to it in the past, but within the report you can see that we present a lot of demographic detail for these priority deaths. I think the demographic detail that repeatedly shows itself, if you look at the 2024 data in these graphs, we are looking at, particularly in terms of deprivation index, there are some flags within those graphs that demonstrate that there is a particularly skewed demographic in some of that. And I think when we as a trust look at what we're doing more roundly in terms of addressing inequalities, that data needs to be factored into that, because I think it's quite stark.
Yes, I saw that too.
Alison?
Yeah, so I do have an update on the Oliver McGowan training. Southwest at the moment continues to be the best performing region in the country, although we ourselves are not happy with our own performance. Regarding Oliver McGowan, there is expected to be a code of conduct that's actually coming to Parliament. But there are some changes that have now been agreed, and to say this is very hot off the press news that I received yesterday about this. So we'll be able to change our compliance levels down to a more manageable level. We'll also have the ability next year, should we wish to do so, to deliver the Tier 1 training face to face, whereas before we had to do the Tier 1 training online. So there are quite a lot of changes that are coming with Oliver McGowan training.
Awesome. Just one more comment from Elizabeth, please.
Yes, I'll again try to keep it brief, David. Thank you. Mary, I just picked up on in Appendix 1, Table 5, that both the respiratory deaths have increased substantially, doubled in the period that you're showing, but also that the ED deaths have been the highest percentage in the last year. So it was really just to ask about that. And then I'll ask my second question at the same time, which was CQC also brought up in their report some concerns about the Carenza ward. And then I noted in the learning deaths that it's they've been a department that's been flagged with 4 deaths. So just wanted to get some insight onto those 2 areas.
Okay, so looking at respiratory, so we're looking at Q3. So it is a seasonal expected change, and it hasn't flagged as a concern, and the respiratory team consider a cohort that they would regard as the unexpected deaths within a modified M&M meeting, but it is a seasonal expectation. In terms of the ED deaths, that is a reflection of 2 things, really. One is that patients who would ordinarily have been admitted elsewhere during that quarter were held for reasonably long periods of time within the emergency department, and therefore they don't increase the overall hospital deaths, but they increase the departmental deaths, and it's a factor pertaining to flow. But I don't want to diminish the fact that we all know that if you've got a long stay in the emergency department, your overall mortality risk is higher, so it will be multifactorial. And I can't mitigate it by a flow reason entirely. It is also because, as a result of flow issues, there were a number of patients who ideally we would have wanted to get home to die because they were on a palliative care pathway, who have been unable to achieve that, and therefore they have died within RCHT, which we know is not what we want for our patients. And there is one big system work stream on end of life and better management of that part of the pathway. I actually can't comment on Carenza ward, and we can go and have a look at that data and I can come back to you on that, but I don't have the answer for that specifically.
Thank you. So can we then note and endorse the quarter learning from deaths report for Q3 and discuss, or we have discussed and note the rise in the HSMR and the explanation the Chief Medical Officer has given. Kim?
Yeah, sorry, Richard, to go back to your question from the Learning Disabilities and Autism team, they've already flagged that, and the consultant nurse Zoe is going to take that through the LEADER process, so we'll be able to update, and LEADER is Learning from Lives and Death, so we have picked that up and we'll take it through.
We note that as well then, please. On 10.4, just to complete this part of the agenda, may I suggest we simply receive and note the report. We can always, the health and safety report, we can always come back to it at a future meeting if necessary.
Was well scrutinised in Quality Assurance Committee, so I think that sounds reasonable, David. Thank you.
Could we receive and note that, please? So if we could break now for 10 minutes rather than 15, if that's acceptable. So if we say it's 11:40 now, if we can come back at 11:50, and then during that 10 minutes, Lindsay and I will reorganise the agenda to give us some sort of hope of getting the court into the pot by 1 o'clock. Is that all right? Thank you.
Some context help.
So welcome back, everybody, to the second part of the agenda. What I would like to do now, if with your agreement, particularly Ian's agreement, is to go to item 12, the Guardian of Safe Working Hours Annual Report, because I know Sarah Coulter is going to join us for this and I don't want to waste her time. Are you there, Sarah?
Yes, good morning.
Is there anything you wanted to say by way of introduction?
I'm sorry, I'm having IT issues. Could you just start the beginning of that sentence again?
Sorry, Sarah, did you ask me to say that again?
Sorry, yeah, I can't hear properly.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So what I was just saying was, thank you for bearing with us in terms of the timing. We've got your report, and we are very pressed for time today, although we know it is important. Is there anything you wanted to say that you particularly wanted to highlight?
I'm happy if people just want to ask questions, actually, for push for time, because I do realise we are running late.
Oh, that's very kind of you. You've made a chair very happy. Are there any questions for Sarah, please, on this report? Mary.
Yeah, thank you. It's not a question, but I just wanted to thank Sarah, really, because this report, it's a good report, it's clear, it demonstrates that a lot of issues that are really important to our medical workforce have been addressed with really positive action throughout the year, with an eye on particularly addressing patient safety concerns quickly and efficiently. What it perhaps doesn't demonstrate is the immense amount of work and oversight that Sarah personally puts into this, in terms of not just producing the report, but following up on the actions, linking in with the different teams. So I just wanted to, through board, thank Sarah for that, and make people aware of the enormous amount of work that goes into this.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that, and can we all associate ourselves with our thanks to you, Sarah, for all the hard work that goes into it, and receive and note the annual report from you as the Guardian.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now we're going to go, if Joe is with us. Now we're going to go to item 13, the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian Annual Report. Joe, could I go over to you, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think Kim's going to introduce.
Thank you. We're well versed, aren't we, Joe? Joe's going to, as she says, present the report. Can I just ask you all, as she's delivering it, can you consider the following? How safe is it for someone who looks and sounds like me, with my role, profession and expertise to speak, to share what I know and question people like you about this issue at this time and in this place. And that very powerful words came from David Naylor, but I'd just like you to consider that as Joe runs through the report. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, thanks for that. I take it the report's been read, and I would just like to highlight some main points and I guess some of my thoughts around it. But before I do that, I'd just like to take an opportunity to thank all of our colleagues who come and raise concerns, either about patient safety, something they've seen or heard that doesn't feel right to them, because it is very challenging to do that, and it's not always easy for our people, particularly considering the current climate we are finding ourselves in. And I'd also just like to say a massive thank you to all of the champions, and that includes Kim, for all of the kind of voluntary work they put in to support this role, and to have conversations with people, and to signpost people to appropriate colleagues. Their role is so important, and they're also engaged and bring so much to it. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. And then secondly, I mentioned in my report, I've recently started going to all of the care group board meetings to talk to all the colleagues at those meetings about speaking up, freedom to speak up, themes that are happening, perhaps not just in individual care groups, but across our organisation. And those conversations have been really useful, particularly in light of care groups getting their action plans ready as part of the staff survey response. But I guess for us to encourage all of our people to speak up in their care groups, they are going to need to feel really psychologically safe to be able to do that. But also, we really need to equip our managers and make sure they also feel safe and supported in their roles as well. I'm having more and more conversation with managers around, can I just run this past you about dealing with difficult situations? So yeah, I think we just need to bear that in mind if we are encouraging our people to speak up within their own areas. And then I guess my last point, and something I've noticed particularly over the past few months, is that Kim and I are getting more contacts to the both of us, which has definitely increased. And the cases that are coming through to Kim and I feel much more complex than they have previously, and require quite often more formal investigations, and will be, because of that and the complexity around them, will be ongoing for quite a long time. I also mentioned in my report that quite a few of the people that have spoken up to me over that time period have needed to take sick time or are currently off sick. And I just wanted to draw that point that often when speaking up doesn't go well, it very often affects our colleagues' well-being. That's it. Thank you.
I just thank you once again for everything you do. I think we're very fortunate to have you in this role, which is a very challenging and complex one, I think. And I always like to take the opportunity, as Steve has already done earlier in the meeting, to say that I couldn't encourage people more strongly to speak up and speak out. And I think the more the board can send out that message, I hope that supports you and supports the staff at a very challenging time. And I think there's also a message for managers in the way that they hear those people speaking up, and what happens as a result. So it's a very, very important aspect of our work. We've got a number of people who'd like to speak. First of all, I'm going to go to Ella.
Thank you. Thanks for the report, Joe. The work you do is really, really valuable to us as an organisation. And I think I agree with what you said around the fact that in an ideal world, our managers would all be really well equipped to deal with concerns being escalated, and people would feel the psychological safety to escalate to the kind of first line of report in the first instance, because then the learning can take place real time, people can reflect, and hopefully the issues can be resolved. I just wondered, in your experience, what would that look like? So what would equipping our managers to be able to deal with this look like? What sort of support would they get or training would they need, do you think?
So I'm going to be completely honest here. I don't think this is always about training. And I think a lot of the time this is sometimes about self-reflection and self-awareness. I think the training we offer to managers is really useful. But I think the other thing that I think would really help some of our managers, and I heard yesterday that there is a managers forum, and I need to follow up on that to find out what that's about, because I'm not sure. But I think sometimes it's important to have that kind of group where managers can go and have some kind of mentorship with each other as well for support. So not about training, but just, you know, a confidential space where people can talk about how tough it is and what they can do to help each other.
Great.
Richard Kramer.
Thank you. So I, as the Ned link for Joe, it's my role to make sure we champion a culture of speaking up at board level. I think we're doing that today, so thank you. I noticed in the chat that Isabel says, anyway, you're amazing, we need to take care of you. So my first question, Joe, is are you taken care of? Do you feel you've got the support because you're dealing with a huge number of complex cases? And secondly, I think you've answered the question that to create a psychologically safe environment is not about training, it's about culture, and that reinforces the wide discussions we're having at the board. So what piece of advice would you give us as a board to make sure we improve our culture so people can speak out?
Oh, thanks for that question, Richard. And I think it's an important one. And I think it's multifaceted, really. But from my point of view, it is about the basic manager staff interactions and how it feels to work in this place. How does it feel to raise a concern here? How easy is it? How hard is it? And are we or are managers, when people raise concerns with them, are they being defensive when concerns are raised, or are they really able to step back and look at the concern with curiosity?
Thank you, Joe.
And I just wanted to come back on the support for me, because I want to say that I'm really well supported. So I get coaching regularly, and I meet with Kim very regularly. And I feel I could reach out to any of the board and any of the execs as well. So I do feel really supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Pleased to hear that, and we're all available to you, and we all support you.
Thank you.
I'll take three more comments, one from Robin, one from Matt, and one from Uzma. Robin first, please.
Yeah, it's a really quick comment, but I was pleased to see when I read the report that the number of anonymous reach outs have reduced. And that's something that we've spoken about as a board, that we really wanted to get underneath people feeling that they could say who they were. It's great we've got an anonymous route, but really positive, Joe, to see colleagues identifying themselves, which helps us have the open conversations and get underneath what the issues were and where the learning exists.
Thank you, Robin. I agree as well. I'm really pleased to see those cases coming down. But I think it's still an important route for some of our colleagues, you know, that we have that. I've noticed as well, actually, in the last couple of months, some of the concerns coming through on the anonymous app have decided to have a conversation with me. So there does seem to be a shift around that. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. And there's a comment from Ian in the chat about corporate cases, which perhaps could be taken up offline.
Okay.
Can you see the chat, Joe?
I can. I'm just reading that now. Okay. I'll contact you, Ian.
Thank you. Now we go to Matt Hill.
It was to explore that, Joe, just whether there was any sense you can make of the difference between the reporting by care groups or without breaching confidentiality. Whether there's a learning from the sort of the anaesthetics, women, children, or the high reporting areas. Any sense you can make of that for us?
It's tricky, isn't it? And obviously I can't break any confidentiality. And, you know, we could look at the cases, you know, the care group who have the highest number of cases and think, you know, that maybe not such a good thing. Or we could say, actually, people are feeling like they can raise concerns in that care group and that's a really good thing. So as I've said, it's something that I want to discuss more with individual care groups as I'm kind of working my way around all of the boards. But obviously, you know, culture is a complicated thing and there are different cultures within different areas of our organisation. And that's part of my reason for exploring those care groups at those meetings, really, to see what more care groups can do to encourage speaking up. And in the care groups where there is more speaking up going on, are we really identifying the learning? You know, are we really learning from what our colleagues are speaking up about? Is that helpful?
Thank you. Yes, it is.
Joe and I had a conversation yesterday. We are going to have a supportive conversation with the senior leadership team of one care group, and it's not because of it isn't just the numbers, it's the nature of the concerns and the repetitive theme. So what we've said is we'll get together in a supportive fashion to see what can we do differently, because we've noted that all of them have said they haven't felt listened to and they're coming to our level now. We're going to try and see what we can do, noting the challenges that the care group have. What can we do differently in a supportive manner?
Thank you, Kim. Uzma.
Firstly, Joe, thank you so much for all the work you do. You know, from just today's reports that we are going to see in staff survey, and the culture report, and the PSERF report, and your report, you know, I think the message is loud and clear that at the moment our staff aren't feeling like they can speak up with the confidence that we'd like. And then that, you know, it was good to see that you were attending the PSERF meetings as well, because without seeing a change in that confidence of staff in speaking up, we're not going to be able to ensure we're meeting our PSERF objectives. So it's really reiterating what Richard said as well, about how you feel we can, as a board, support the work you are doing in seeing an increase in those numbers. Without seeing an increase in those numbers, we're, you know, not going to achieve our objectives as an organisation, but especially, you know, be able to see the change in the behaviours and culture that you've highlighted in your report. So just an open invitation to let us know what we can do more.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it is that message for all of the individual care groups around perhaps what we can do to support them, rather than what we can do to support me, but what can we do to support them in their, you know, wanting people to speak up, raise concerns, and actually not always concerns, but ideas for improvement. You know, does it feel safe to do that in all of the areas? Because it doesn't always have to be a concern, but actually not all of our staff feel able to raise ideas. for fear of not being listened to or not being taken seriously or just feeling embarrassed to do it. So I think it's opening up that whole conversation of, you know, how are you feeling? How are you today kind of thing, those basic level conversations, as well as the, you know, bringing forward ideas for improvement and concerns and worries as well.
I think one thing you notice about the NHS when you've worked in other sectors is that once a consensus forms around, you know, whatever the big idea happens to be, it's very, very difficult for anyone who wants to challenge received wisdom or to put forward an alternative point of view to get a hearing because, you know, it's a very command and control type of environment. So I think we should always encourage, in my background in universities, you know, academic freedom is all about encouraging people to challenge received wisdom and to put forward controversial or unpopular ideas. And I think it should be the same in our setting as well. Have we answered the O'Keefe question, Kim?
I think so. I think taking time to see it from our staff's perspective is really important because we see the same themes coming up. So, you know, we had the earlier conversation about staff not feeling listened to or empowered or done unto. I think this lens changes it. It isn't just about learning and development. It's taking time to make sure we've got the right vision, values, and people feel equipped to listen, act, and feedback. So thank you.
And thank you very much, Jo.
Thank you.
I hope you thought that was a helpful conversation for you, but we're all here for you at any time. And I think you can see by the appreciation around the boardroom table that we greatly value what you do.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. We just need to record in our minutes that we've noted the key issues that Jo identified and that we've discussed the various themes and trends that have come out of it. And I think we ought to record our thanks to Jo, as we did for Sarah, for all the hard work that goes into this. And I think, Steve, you know, we can't really make the message clearer about the freedom of colleagues to speak up and speak out.
I don't think we can, but I think we need to continue taking every possible action to communicate, to share, and to reassure colleagues that we want colleagues to speak up openly. We want colleagues to speak up confidentially where they feel they can't speak openly, but we want that culture where it is encouraged, supported, or a key thing we can ask of as a board is that our colleagues always, in every instance, feel safe to raise issues so that we can deliver improvements. I think that's a really important message, and Jo plays a key critical role in helping us to convey that.
Actually, we could record that as well. So with renewed thanks to Jo, can we go back to item 11? Finance and Performance Committee Assurance Report to Board. Adrian, I don't know how you want to handle this because I know Adam chaired one meeting while you were away, but can I just hand over to you, please?
Yeah, I was going to ask Adam to highlight any points that came out of the March meeting, and then I'll go on and summarise the April one.
Thank you. Adrian, Adam, sorry.
Thank you. If someone could give me the precise page number in the PDF document, please, so I can just get to item 11 quickly. Thank you.
241 of 620.
To save time, Chair, shall I do the April whilst?
Okay, Adam?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So at the April meeting, the first thing that we wanted to do was acknowledge and congratulate staff across the organisation in delivering the 24-25 operational and financial plan and coming in with a small surplus. So good work there. We spent a lot of time discussing the operational plan and we particularly wanted to highlight the challenges that there will be around delivering that plan, and that's in relation to urgent emergency care improvements, ambulance handover, productivity, the level of the SIP. So we just wanted to highlight that. We looked at, we actually looked at a request for additional funding for the tower fire phase work, which we approved, but we have asked for full costing details for the remainder of that programme to come to a future FPC. There was a mistake on page 254, which I should have picked up when I proofread the document, which is in Financial Recovery and SIP report. That first bullet point says unidentified SIP is 12.5 million. It's not, it's 12.5%, which is 6.2 million. The other thing that I wanted to highlight to the group was the eCare assurance report. And we have asked for, we didn't approve the report, we noted the report, but we've asked for greater clarity around the impacts on revenue, and that is due to come to the May FPC committee. And that was really, obviously the good news about the Women and Children's Hospital. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I suggest we don't discuss eCare today because we've now appointed a check and challenge, Ned, and we'll be coming back to it. But when the executive is ready, we can have that discussion. Adam, are you?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to Adrian. I'm trying not to duplicate. Obviously, the previous month we covered a lot of the same items that Adrian's just covered, with a particular focus on the draft at that stage of the finance and operational plan for 25-26, which we spent the majority of the meeting on. There is one typo I needed to flag, similarly to Adrian, on page 243 of 620. It says month 1 revenue finance report. I missed that. It should say month 11 revenue finance report. And then the only other thing to highlight is there's been some really good work ongoing for a period of time around key worker accommodation, and we got a really helpful update on the really good progress that's being made on the plans around key worker accommodation at the March Finance and Performance Committee. Okay, thank you.
So there's nothing that either of you wanted to escalate?
The only, I was going to ask if there were any changes required to the operational and financial plan that we approved on behalf of the board.
We've got an item later on the agenda, so perhaps we'll pick it up then.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions for Adam or for Adrian? If not, can we note the report from the March and April meetings of the Finance and Performance Committee? And then move on to 11.1, which is the month 12 revenue report. Ian.
Conscious of time, I'll take the paper as read as usual, and I'll keep it to the kind of key headlines. So this is the outturn position for the financial year, and as Adrian's already alluded to, really positive position to be able to report a £92,000 surplus against our break-even plan. As board members and the public will be aware, we've struggled with delivering that plan for most of the year, with some of the exceptional costs that we've incurred through the year, and the really difficult decisions and efforts by all of the teams across the trust to help us deliver that position. So that is now subject to external audit, and we'll go through Audit and Risk Assurance Committee for full sign-off and assurance. The accounts were formally submitted last Friday to the Department of Health and Social Care, and then the final submission of that happens at the end of June. I think also just to note of importance is that the whole system achieved a break-even position, so the report includes details around that. But we are measured financially in our performance as a system, as a collective, not just as individual organisations. So that's a really important part of our system working. We set the control totals that are mentioned in the plan back in January, and that was to make sure we could land this year-end position. So I just want to extend my thanks to all of the care groups and corporate departments and the staff throughout the organisation who've helped us deliver that. I think, as you alluded to earlier in your update, Chair, it's the 6th year in a row that as an organisation we've achieved a break-even position. We have had support, as outlined in the report, from the ICB and worked as a system in delivering that position, which again I think is a really positive step in what continues to be, as we've already described, a challenging financial climate. So I'll leave it there and open to questions, I think, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian. While people are gathering their thoughts, could we just thank you once again for, and I know you'll say it's a team effort, but can I just thank everyone for remarkable achievement, actually. I mean, 35 million plus is no mean achievement, given the environment we're operating in. And I know as soon as you got to the top of that hill, you've got to look to an even higher one. But I think it's worth pausing and thanking you for that outturn. There are many other organisations which haven't managed to achieve that, and it doesn't help anyone not to break even, because at some point you run out of road if you don't. So if there are no, because I know we have discussed this before, so if there are no further points on the...
I might have a hand up, Chair.
Sorry?
I think Isabel's got her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Isabel, I missed your hand. Beg pardon.
No problem. I wanted to just echo thanks, really. I mean, it was an amazing achievement given where we were probably through the first quarter of the year and how we managed to retrieve the position. So congrats to everybody involved. It was just an offline question, really, but do we know how many systems in England managed to deliver a balanced budget? Because it does feel, 6 years on the trot is a major achievement. I just wonder whether we deserve a certificate of recognition or something from somebody at national level. I am saying that tongue in cheek, by the way.
Yes, just to answer that. So we don't yet know. There's always a little bit of reluctance, you should expect, because these are all draft positions subject to external audit. So I will share with Board, Isabel, in terms of that national position once we have it, but I don't have that available other than, as I said, a local system position.
Thank you, Ian. I did want to make a strong point about cash earlier, but I think, while you've got the floor, it's only fair to say that we're not going to run out of cash tomorrow, as it were. But yeah. I wondered if you did want to say a word about cash.
Absolutely, yeah, more than happy to. So we touch on cash as well in the 25-26 operating plan. So at the end of the year, we finished our cash position, as you can see in the report, in a reasonably healthy position at just over £30 million. We expect that to start to be impacted as we enter 25-26. At the end of April, I do have the April position as of the end of yesterday, so we were better than plan at the end of April, so we're at 35.5 million as at the end of April against a £25 million plan for cash. Our cash will reduce during the year, and it's really important that our SIP delivery enables us to make that position, and we'll bring forward to Board and through Finance and Performance Committee some of that sensitivity analysis around what that would look like. So we've done some assessment of the risk adjusted SIP for next year and how that would impact it. And just to reassure Board, I have a regular weekly meeting with my senior finance team to review it on a weekly basis as well. So yeah, we continue to report that in the normal way and probably need to keep even more scrutiny on it into 25-26.
If I could just add to that scrutiny that Ian's just described is critically important. And we will need to deliver to the trajectory our cost improvement plan and our normal business as usual plans as well, to ensure that we manage the cash position as Ian's just described. And we're all, I'm clear, we're all clear on the scale of the challenge that we have to achieve that cost improvement plan, so that drive through our executive colleagues, the oversight through our Finance and Performance Committee, and the oversight of the Board on these matters, including on cash, is going to be really important to us over the course of the next 12 months.
Thank you. Happy to move on. Could we note the draft month 12 and closing position with thanks, and the achievement of the break-even plan with a small favourable variance? And note that the financial position is now subject to the year-end process, including full external audit review and that the outcomes from this will be reported in the normal way by our Audit and Risk Assurance Committee. Happy with that, Adam? As Chair of Audit?
Yeah.
Item 11.2, Ian, are you happy to take it as read, or is there anything you need to say?
No, happy to take that as read and take any questions on it. It's a positive position again in terms of spending very close to our capital budget and makes a significant difference to the facilities and the environment that our staff and patients experience on a day-to-day basis. But happy to take it straight to questions, Chair.
Any questions for Ian on the capital position? If not, can we note the financial position for the capital programme for month 12, and that we have operated within the capital departmental expenditure limit budget this year? And then can we go on to 11.3, the productivity report? Again, Ella, hopefully we can take this as read.
Yeah, we can, Chair. The only one thing I'd say is as we embark on a new year, I think it's really a new financial year, it's really important we note the productivity assumptions baked into our plan, and we focused in on the data provided by NHS England in terms of developing our CIP and improvement plans this year. So we are expecting, if we deliver that plan in full, it would be an 8.6% improvement in our productivity, which speaks really loudly to the requirement to get back to kind of pre-pandemic levels of productivity in the NHS. So I just wanted to note that.
Worth noting that we're now within the median anyway,
Yeah.
before that improvement. Is that right,
Yeah.
Steve?
That's right.
That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a number of things on the agenda paper to note. I won't read them all out if that's all right. Lindsay, could you capture them? Thank you. 11.4 is the financial and operational plan summary, which is just a brief discussion today because it's been submitted.
Yeah.
But obviously we'll be monitoring it at every board meeting. Ella.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a summary paper because the full plan has been through the committees and board throughout over the last 8 weeks, really, as we've submitted the first plan back in March. We had feedback from that from NHS England. They categorised all of the plan submissions nationally, put us in category 2, which required some further improvements and amendments to be made, which have now been reflected. That plan was submitted yesterday in line with the requirement for the deadline on the 30th of April. And essentially where we're at is, from a financial perspective, as discussed previously, we're submitting a break-even plan. On an operational basis, we're now compliant with the 6 core main metrics within this plan. The paper details the approach and the challenge within that, and at Finance and Performance Committee in particular, we've noted the level of ambition. It's the right ambition, and we're really clear on that, but the extraordinary efforts that will be required to continue those improvements and to make the step changes that we've talked about, for example, in the urgent and emergency care improvement plan earlier in this meeting today. And from a workforce perspective, I think it probably is important for me to just pull out around our kind of speaking to our longer term sustainability, our requirements within this plan to make savings on our pay are significant. There is an assumption in this plan that we will need to reduce by almost 500 whole time, so it's 492 whole time equivalents, and that is 6.7% of our current workforce. Our intention is to do this through protecting as best we can our frontline services and our clinical services. So we are looking at doing it predominantly through our turnover, through our reduction in premium spend, and all of our teams are heavily engaged in developing plans that do those workforce reductions in the most thoughtful and keeping quality and safety at the forefront of our mind in doing so. But I think it's only right that we are really overt here today around the challenge that we face, as you mentioned at the very start of the meeting, David. So I think that's really all I need to say other than what is in the paper for everybody to read, and really happy to open the floor to questions and discussion.
Can I just check first, Steve, given we're in public, whether there's anything you wanted to say on the workforce position?
If I could make a couple of comment briefly. I know there's been a huge amount of work on this plan. David, you set the scale of the challenge that we're facing and the NHS is facing really clearly right at the start of the meeting. This plan is really trying to deliver radical improvement in those key areas that need that improvement. So urgent and emergency care particularly. And we know if we achieve that, that will have significant direct benefits to improve quality, to reduce harm, and actually to improve the environment in which our staff are working as well. So I think we first and foremost need to be clear on the intent to deliver really significant improvements in urgent and emergency care, and secondly, to build on the great work that's been done on reducing the waiting times for elective care. That's been a real strength in our plan. So the plan will build on that and progress that further, potentially placing us in one of the best performing trusts in the country for elective care. We need to do both of those within what is an extraordinarily challenged financial environment. As board members know, we are not an exception here. Trusts across the country are having to manage with really very, very significant levels of cost improvement programmes. And we are approaching this, as Ella has indicated, in a way that enables us to provide the best care we can within the resources that we are enabling. This plan, plus the plan across the system, should result in fewer patients who don't need to come to this hospital coming and receiving their care in the community, fewer patients who don't need to be admitted being admitted as they receive their care in the community, and fewer patients waiting in our hospital once they've finished their acute hospital stay. The reason I cover those aspects, David, particularly, is those transformations should allow us to reduce the number of beds which are necessary to support the level of demand that we have. And that's one of the key things that enables us to have the level of confidence that some of those workforce reductions, particularly around high cost agency and bank, can be enabled. So there is a real alignment. The team have worked very, very hard with our teams across the organisation to deliver this. But we certainly shouldn't underestimate the scale of the challenge which is necessary to achieve this. And you'll also see the importance of progressing rapidly with e-care and progressing our Women and Children's Hospital. The only other comment I'd want to make is around the urgent and emergency care improvement trajectory. Adrian asked the question about any changes since the finance and performance considerations. You'll see there's a marginal improvement in the ambulance handover trajectory, particularly in the last couple of months of the year. So that's the one area that has changed. Whilst that trajectory at the end of the year delivers the requirements that NHS England have asked for, NHS England have been very, very clear that we must continue to identify further opportunities to accelerate those improvements. So I know we've mentioned that a number of times now, but I would want to assure the board, David, that executive colleagues, clinical leaders and our teams across the organisation continue to review every option to allow us to deliver those urgent and emergency care improvements going forward. And then just by a final comment, this will be challenging for our whole organisation. We are seeking to work as closely as we can with teams across our organisation, and I think we would all recognise the worry that I'm sure is there in colleagues across our organisation when they see the level of ambition and the scale of the challenge that we're managing. So we hear that, colleagues share that with us, and we'll do everything we can to work transparently and openly with colleagues across the organisation.
I know you've written to staff and you'll be having town meetings, and you've got a strong communication plan around all of this.
That's absolutely right. So we have shared the headlines of this plan during the course of this board meeting with every staff member across the organisation this morning. And then there are a set of engagement events, which I think the first one, Ella, is later on this afternoon. And then we've got a series of opportunities to brief staff and for staff to ask questions of us as we do everything we can to share both the intent, the ambition and the scale of the challenge that we face.
Thank you, Steve. Alison? Did you want to come in?
No, I didn't have my hand up. I was just agreeing. Thank you.
So we've had several iterations of this plan in committee and at board. We will have further conversations, but can we just note that it's been submitted for the moment and the comments that Ella and Steve have made? And could we also circulate to the board, Ella, a copy of the plan as finally submitted? Thank you. So could we note then and endorse the recommendations of the report, please, Lucy? I think we've hopped around so much, I need to make sure I haven't missed anything. But I think that takes us to item 14, which is the People and Culture Committee, Richard.
Yeah, I will be as quick as possible. We've had 2 meetings, including an additional meeting to discuss our work on structure, and that's even more pertinent on the back of the staff survey and ongoing pressures in the external environment. Alison will discuss the results of our staff survey shortly. Needless to say, it's really important that we make progress. Staff feel that any actions are acted upon, that we value employees, and we get people more connected to the organisation, which very much links to our discussions on culture, because the culture of RCHT as an employer has a huge impact on engagement, productivity and retention. It's driven very much by the people team who are responsible for delivering, but it's a whole organisational responsibility. And we're looking at putting together a proposal on how we engage staff in shaping what aspirational work culture should be and what support we need to provide to our workforce. And finally, in terms of assurance, what still needs further assurance is the review of our occupational health offer. That's still an ongoing issue. It needs to be shaped further, including with the FT colleagues. So I'm just going to hand over to Alison to talk about the staff survey.
Questions?
Do we just want to pause on the People and Culture Committee first and note the report before we go to Alison? So are we going on to 14.1 now then, Richard?
That's right, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
So any questions to Richard before we move on? Sorry, Alison, I beg pardon. Over to you.
Thank you. So now looking at our staff survey results, and I think everything we've heard this morning in terms of what we're required to deliver this year means that we really do need to concentrate on our culture to make sure that we have that empowered, listened environment that we've been talking about. And to say everything I'm going to say now, I think links very much in with the presentation that we had from Joe Burton as Freedom to Speak Up champion as well. So I'm going to take the paper as read and just pull out a few key highlights. Just as a reminder, our staff survey result this year in terms of engagement was at 45.3%. Now that compared to a national average of 48.6%. So we were 3% lower than the national average, and our comparators for the acute sector had an engagement score of 49%. The reason why I just would like to remind people of that is it is so important that we get our staff to fill in the staff survey so that we get a full rounded picture. And before we know it, we'll blink and we'll be completing our staff survey in September this year. One of the things I've heard since we've been talking about our staff survey results is, well, we had the staff survey at a time where we launched some really difficult and challenging measures. And whilst that is true, I don't want this to be an excuse because every other NHS trust is in the same position as us. And so therefore, I think this year we do have to think about doing things differently. I think we really have to take on board the results of the staff survey here and pay attention to the areas that we really need to, quote unquote, pull our socks up. Our culture is really important. We need to ensure that our staff do feel valued in this really operationally challenged time. And good staff experience, we know, leads to better patient outcomes. So it's in everybody's interest that actually we do listen to the results of the staff survey. So you can see only one of the people promised areas in terms of inclusion matched what our nationally benchmarked group. The rest of the people promised elements unfortunately slipped back on our previous result of improvement from the previous year. So we're going to concentrate this year in terms of the people promise elements of we are compassionate and inclusive. We have a voice that counts. We've heard the importance from that again from Joe this morning, and we are always listening. It also links very much to what we heard first thing this morning in terms of that patient story around listening and learning. The other points that I want to bring out, we can see again that the results generally, particularly for our ethnic minority colleagues, means that they have a worse staff experience, experience more bullying and harassment than our colleagues that are from a white background. It's a slightly mixed result for our colleagues that have long-term conditions or disabilities. We've got some areas of improvement, but we also do have some areas of decline as well. And I just wanted to pick up on that particular part because coming to work in RCHT at the moment, I think for our staff is very much dependent on the experience that you're receiving based on your personal protected characteristics, and that cannot be right. And we do really need to call that out to challenge it and to make sure that all our staff are treated with kindness and compassion. We are doing something slightly different this year in terms of, and we've already started, we've asked care groups to put their action plans together, but we've actually got a people panel and we've had care groups come this week and present, not everybody yet, but present their staff survey action plans at that people panel. That has gone really well. It's given a higher level of assurance in terms of the focus on those staff survey results. However, one of the things that we did pick up this week is I think we're being a little bit over ambitious. So yesterday in our executive development team meeting, I was urging colleagues to make sure we pick out the priorities and we do the priorities well, rather than to spread ourselves too thin on trying to make big improvements across the board. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. There are so many big issues there. Clearly, we just haven't got time to discuss them in detail today. We weren't really intending to. But just to assure people watching, we've had several deep discussions about this survey, both in private board and in committee, and we'll continue to do so. And we will come back to public board when we've got more time and space and more analysis and more plans of how to improve the situation. But I think that would be the best way to deal with it today, rather than try and rush discussion when we've already got several items to get through. But equally, we did want to report it today in public. Is that all right, Alison?
Thank you.
Good. So this is an ongoing and very important issue for us. On the board diversity action plan, there will be a full plan coming to us later, Lindsay. The various actions that are recorded on the agenda paper taken as read, really. So could we note those? And
yes, Chair, yeah, just to note that obviously that there's 9 actions. 1 is closed, 5 are work in progress, and 3 are proposed complete. Obviously, we the plan is monitored through our People and Culture Committee, and we will be reviewing it in September time. But if anyone has any questions, I think Usma's put her hand up.
Can we note that and come back to it? Usma, did you want to come?
I did have a
Yes,
question, if that's okay. Just 2 points on the board diversity plan. One, I noted that there was a recommendation to close the action for Oliver McGowan training because we'd had it at the board development session in April, but because that's been delayed, shall we keep that action open? And the second was around the proposal to complete action 4 for the recruitment campaign for the next director. And again, I would value keeping that open while the recruitment process is commenced, and just so we can keep an eye on it. That's okay.
Thank you, Usma. So, subject to Usma's comments, could we note those actions, and could we then come back to this when we receive the full report later in the year? Thank you. I wonder if I could just play about with the agenda once more, because there's a Go Command meeting that's been called for 1 o'clock, and Robin will have to go to that. So could we take the integrated performance report now, please, Robin? Sorry to surprise you, bearing in mind that most of the major issues arising from it we've already dealt with.
As well, scrutinising FPC and QUAC and all of the topics we discussed the board here, picked up, I think, nearly every point in the IPR, Integrated Performance Report. I just wanted to draw the board's attention to some indicators linking to the urgent care framework we discussed earlier for colleagues to effectively track as we go forwards. And that is 85% of our ambulance handovers in March were greater than the 15-minute standard, just so we can really ground ourselves on where that is for us. And that resulted in 3,543 hours of SWAST crews, the ambulance crews, time lost at the front of our hospital. We achieved an average of 28 minutes for initial assessment in ED, and we should be at 15 minutes. And we achieved 87-minute average for wait to be seen, which should be at 60 minutes. But we have actions in train that we've discussed for the clinical vision of flow targeting those, but I wanted to draw colleagues' attention to those numbers so that in future boards we can also drill down in that, and we raise those very numbers in both Finance Performance Committee and Quality Assurance Committee. But I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Robin. Any questions for Robin on the IPR? I suggest we come back to it in more detail at the next meeting. So can we note it? And I think it's been emphasised throughout the meeting, Steve, the importance of the emergency department and ambulance performance indicators.
And if we could just check, I don't think there are, but just to check with Mary, Kim and Alison, are there any other aspects in the IPR that we haven't already covered that you'd want to escalate? I think we've picked them up as we've gone, but
I think the only one I would, it stands out a little bit, but we spoke about it in QUAC, is the duty of candour performance. There is a 10-day time frame. It's an indicator. It's not an enforcement. It's assuring the board that everyone gets their verbal, but we are currently working. We've got 6 cases in the trust. Naomi Burden's working with the care groups and the clinicians and man-marking each one. She's our patient safety. So we will bring back some future learning on how we manage to improve our time frame, because it's patient focused and it's the right thing for families, patients and staff. So it's just noting that it stands out a little stark. Thank you.
Okay. You note that as well?
Alison, item as well.
Yeah, just from the IPR to note that stress has increased again. Obviously, the link with occupational health, again, the IPR notes that the referral is now 7 weeks from the point of referral. We should shortly have medical cover 5 days a week is the good news that I'd like to report to board.
And you were going to escalate occupational health from People and Culture Committee, and we haven't got time to do it today.
No, I did mention that earlier, that
But you
it's
did
still very
mention
much
it when
on
you
our
reported.
agenda and needs to be considered by the board.
And work is underway. Okay, can we note that with those subsequent comments, please? I think that takes us then to item 15, the Remuneration and Appointments Committee. Isabel?
Yeah, I'll just take it as read, really. I don't think there's anything that I need to say. Thank you. Unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions. Can we note it? Thank you. Item 16, the Charitable Funds Committee. On 16.1, the funding request. Seems like a no-brainer, Richard. Could we approve that as a corporate trustee?
Yes. Yes. I mean, there are a number of things that need board approval because of spend. So
I was just thinking of that particular one.
But that clinical support work is very much needed. So yes, and it's supported by the Charities Committee.
So I'm looking around, unless anyone disagrees, as we're now sitting as corporate trustee. We can approve that. That's done. Could we then go back to your report?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So we've had two meetings, the Charities Committee, very busy, and actually reflects increasing activity and progress on key projects. So very much thank you to Ian and Alison and their teams for all their work. So in relation to the family appeal, we've approved the option of purchasing a property off-site. We're setting up a task to finish group with clear timelines and fundraising targets, in addition to the millions secured. In relation to the Mermaid Centre, we're recommending to the board that we go ahead with this project to seek approval for the changes that will create a calm and relaxing waiting room and better outside space and accessibility, and for the design works. We're also recommending to the board to approve the funding for the refurbishment of the Children's Cancer Unit, funded by Chef Paul Ainsworth, the Pendennis Shipyard, and additional support from the One and All Fund. And we also want to update the board on the proposed funding to increase funding round to invite each care group to submit an application for funding for between 25 to 50,000, which will represent an impactful use of funds, but also encourage care groups to come up with future wish lists for funding. And finally, we didn't have time to fully review our investment portfolio, so we'll have an additional meeting to look again at the suitability of our investments and level of risk. And we've already improved the case for investment in the additional post. So that's my update. I hope all those recommendations will have board approval.
Is the board sitting as the charitable trust happy to approve those? Alison?
I just wanted to, Richard mentioned it, but just call it out of the continued support from Pendennis Shipyard in terms of the corporate fundraising they have done year on year now for us. Thank you.
Well, I was just going to say, could we thank and record our thanks to all our philanthropic partners for all the support that they give us?
Absolutely.
So I think we're approving as the corporate trustee all of those requests. Lindsay?
Yeah, those requests are within the remit of Charitable Funds Committee. The only request that we're being asked the board as corporate trustee to approve is the haematology transfusion support, which we've done.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I thought Richard said we had a number of things we had to approve.
Oh, doesn't it? Okay.
So just to be clear then, the only thing we have to approve is the clinical haematology post. The other things were in your gift, as it turns out.
Oh, well, there you go. I have more power than I thought. Thank you, Chair.
I think the particular one that Richard's checking on is the Mermaid Centre. So we, with Duchy Health Charity, we've agreed a way forward with that, but there will be, and there's an update in the assurance report from Charitable Funds, but the full case will come back through board for full approval once the design's been concluded. So it was more, I think, in terms of for today, it's about updating the progress that's been made with that, and particularly the generosity of Duchy Health Charity in that combined project as well. There.
It's due to go to their board as well, Duchy Health Board.
Thank you for the clarification.
We've brought our usual laser-focused clarity to bear, and Lindsay will make sure that everything's clear.
Isabel's got her hand up.
Yeah.
But somebody wants to speak? Isabel.
Yeah, sorry, David. It was just around the haematology post, and it may not be for today, but just noticing that we're proposing funding this for a fixed term period. And I just wonder whether what is being thought about in terms of beyond the lifetime of the fixed term, because clearly there'll be a cost pressure then for the organisation to consider without our corporate trustee hat on. And it may be for the next, for the next charities committee. Ian might have something to say.
Yeah, just to add to that, so that there was a good discussion at the Charitable Funds Committee about this post. It's testing our boundaries of how long we agree post for as a charity, actually. But there was a significant legacy as outlined in the report, and having met with Dr. Tucker and talked through it, it was clear from the team that that was something they wanted. So what we did though ask for is, so it would be a permanent appointment, but with a review after 18 months. To understand the impact of it, and the committee was very mindful of that exact point, Isabel, and being able to need to understand the benefit it has, and how future funding might look for it. But there is significant funding within that charitable fund to support it at this point.
All right, Isabel.
Yes, I just think that the report would be helpful if it could indicate what that looks like over the time frame, because it assumes that there's no movement in salary during that time, which I would have thought there would be in terms of inflationary rises, if nothing else. So in terms of the impact on the fund, it's more than perhaps what's being stated initially in the report, but that I might be wrong. I don't want to make an issue of it now, but I would like to explore that perhaps offline.
And then please, because we can't take up too much board time on one.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Isabel. That takes us on then to audit and risk assurance. Adam?
Thank you. And this is page 447 in our pack. And most of what I was going to say has been covered either in David's chair's briefing or Steve's chief exec's briefing or Ian's finance briefings. So just to emphasise, we've been carefully considering the internal and external audit plans for 25-26 to make sure we're focused on the right areas for independent challenge. We'll keep that internal audit plan under review, for example, to ensure we're considering the finance and operational plan that we've just been talking about appropriately. As has been mentioned, the external audit work is underway for 24-25. That's looking both at the statement of accounts, which is basically what Ian covered under item 11, but also considering the trust's value for money performance. So in that context, we've been carefully considering at the audit committee, the changes to national financial rules and regulations that impact on our accounts. And we've been carefully considering what we've been doing as a trust to improve our value for money assessment. And I should probably finish with a thanks to the finance team. I don't think we took enough time to do that earlier in terms of the statement of accounts. To have produced that by last week is a really impressive performance. And that audit is now underway. And as has been said, will be reported to audit committee and board in June. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Adam, very concise. Can we note Adam's report? Any comments or questions? Thank you very much. Item 18.1 on gifts and hospitality needs to come here because it's reserved for the board, but I think it's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
Yes, Chair, yeah, as you say, it's a matter reserved for board. It's been through Audit and Risk Assurance Committee and they're recommending it for approval. The report outlines the changes and the actual policies included with track changes for colleagues to see. So it's recommended for approval, please.
Board happy to approve? Thank you. 18.2 Board Assurance Framework, Lindsay.
Yeah, so the BAF again is presented at each public meeting, and all changes are made in track changes since the last approval at the board, which was in March. I won't go into the detail because again, hopefully the report is self-explanatory, but we have focused our discussions around our financial operational challenges, our key transformation programmes about women's and children's and e-care, OD, culture, and our workforce, and how we're responding to addressing the pressures on quality of care and our continued focus on UEC and the programmes of work that we have in place that provide that assurances on hopefully delivering actions around our medical model and our clinical vision of flow. So we have tried to incorporate a range of our, organisational risks within our discussions around the BAF. So hopefully that's reflected.
Questions, comments? Could we note the new gaps in assurance and mitigating actions agreed in March and April, and note the common gaps in assurance? Thank you. 18.3, corporate risk register.
We've taken that as read, Chair, if that's okay. Yeah, self-explanatory.
We're noting the new risks and noting the closed risks. And again, I think at a future board meeting, we ought to have a longer discussion of risk. Have to move on today. 19 committee annual reports, valuations, effectiveness in terms of reference. Lindsay.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. Each of the committee meetings have reviewed their annual report and their annual review of effectiveness. Overarching themes are outlined in the report, but I just cover a couple of those off, which is each of the committees have demonstrated full compliance with their terms of reference. The committee, all our committees have had a vast amount of business covered over in the last year. Agendas have been full, paper, we've overrun on our timings and things like that because there's been a huge business need for us to spend that time talking about our key priorities. But there are some actions around how we can improve our work plan, improve the matters that we're discussing, look at having shorter agendas, look at our committee packs, improving the quality of the papers, the length of the papers and things like that. So there'll remain to be key areas of focus for us. And then within the report, there is each of the committee terms of reference for approval. 3 of the committee terms of reference were subject to change, which are recommended to the board. But I'm asking that if we could approve all sets of terms of reference for the committees, please, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. I think we had made some good progress on shorter agenda and shorter packs of papers, but I'm afraid we have slipped back a bit today, so I'll take that up offline. But yes, we'll receive and note the summary and approve the committee terms of reference. Board content?
Chair, just one comment that I made at one of the committee meetings is in relation to the number of people that completed the questionnaires for the committee meetings. In the review, the figures were sitting around 50%. And I think considering the significance that we put on the staff survey, we should be leading by example. So we should be looking to get 100% in those committee evaluations. So just a heads up to colleagues around the table, really.
Fair point. Yeah. Could we add that as well? Look for 100% compliance. Okay, thank you for that. 20 is the summary consideration of risk that's arise today. Quite a lot of it about.
Yeah, so I think there's the overarching themes are quite common to what I've just referred to in the discussion around the BAF. So we've talked a lot around our UEC performance and how we're going to monitor that and the mechanisms that the board have put in place for that assurance. We've talked and spent quite a lot of time talking about fracture, neck of femur and stroke performance, and there has been much discussion and oversight through Quality Assurance Committee. We've talked around the transformational change programmes and that they are reflected in the board assurance frameworks. That's our e-care and our women's and children's programmes. And obviously we've got some great news today that Adam will be our check and challenge NED for e-care. We've talked a lot around culture and we've reflected that within our BAF, but I think we can probably further do more around that now that obviously the staff survey results are available. We're engaging with staff more and more, particularly there's discussions today around our performance, our annual plan, sorry. And I think that was all the areas that I've written down for today, Chair. I don't know, but welcome exec colleagues or NED colleagues to comment further if they've picked up anything that I haven't reflected.
Very good. Well done, Lindsay. Pick all that up. Any further comments? Thank you for that. So that brings us then to item 21, Questions from the public? The public have been very patient. Could I hand over to you, please, Lindsay?
Thank you, Chair. We've had really good engagement with up to 53 people viewing our meeting today. We've had one question from Catherine Tregunner, who's a member of staff. She's asked, it has been noted that productivity has dropped in the last year, in the last 5 years since sorry, I'll rephrase that. It has been noted that productivity has dropped in the last 5 years since working from home, especially in weather like this. I think there needs to be a policy or criteria met if working from home is needed, for example, those with chronic illnesses, etc. Obviously, this relates to a comment around productivity and our workforce, and I'm going to ask Ella and Alison to comment, but probably go to Ella first. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. So the productivity decrease since 2020 is a phenomenon across the whole of the NHS. Our productivity reports have spoken to that and have explained the extent to which we can understand our productivity drop. It has not been linked to working from home in any way in the data that I've seen, either nationally or locally. In terms of our policy, we do have a policy in place at the Trust, and the requirement is that all teams and leaders ensure we have sufficient capacity and working arrangements to support services. So I think the policy that exists does cater for individual circumstances to be taken into account. But as I say, the productivity analysis we've got to date doesn't link it to working from home at present.
Awesome.
Well, I concur with everything that Ella said there. As I say, in terms of from an HR perspective, we do have guidelines around working from home. Obviously, it's very much dependent on whether you're a front-facing clinical team or whether you're a back office corporate member of staff in terms of those flexibilities, and it has to be very much driven by business need. Notwithstanding, obviously, we do make arrangements for those staff that have protected characteristics, which would require some additional reasonable adjustments.
Thank you. So thank you for the question, and thank you to the executives for the answer. That completes item 21. So the only thing that's standing between you and lunch now is item 22, the meeting effectiveness evaluation. Is there any feedback anybody wants to give? Alison?
Yeah, I think it was good today in terms of, I felt at the beginning of the meeting, your report and Steve's report focused on our priorities. The other thing that I wanted to pull out today was I was particularly taken by the comments that Mary made about health inequalities, and I felt that we had the time to kind of go into that, and I'd like to hear more on that particular issue when we were discussing the HMSR data. So I just wanted to pull out some good points from today. Thank you.
I think the only thing from me is that, a lot of what we have to do is mandated and is to do with compliance. And I'm still trying to get us to a position where we've got the space at board to have longer, deeper discussions about what really matters to us. And I think we were starting to do that at the beginning of the meeting, but then just the sheer length of the agenda meant I had to rush things rather more than I would have liked. So I know we're on the case there, Steve, but we'll need to have further conversations about how we organise the agenda and the paperwork to optimise contributions from members of the board. Adrian.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The other thing I would say is for members of the public that may or may not be tuned in, it may appear that we rush over some of the papers towards the end of the agenda, but you can take a great deal of assurance of the level of scrutiny that they get at subcommittee meetings. So a lot of those papers that we've gone through have already had a great level of scrutiny.
So if I were observing the meeting, I might feel, oh, well, what a shame there wasn't more discussion about the staff survey, but for the reasons you've explained, that's why. But equally, I hope we can get to a position where we've got agenda that give us a bit more time to breathe. Okay, so thank you very much for all your contributions, and thank you very much for anyone who's managed to endure the whole of the marathon in terms of people who've been observing us. But I think that brings us to the end of our public board meeting. Our next one is on the 3rd of July. So I'm now going to close the meeting to enable us to have a short break before we go into our private session. Thank you all very much.